Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching first part of What If Naruto was son of God and makes Grafia and Gabriel his lover. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel, and for more exclusive and spicy content, follow me on Patreon. Link is in the description below. And now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
A cabin made of logs and constructed by hand was located deep within a verdant forest many years ago. It was neither ostentatious nor hurriedly constructed. Even during the most severe storms, it remained strong and stable as the sun gradually sank behind the horizon. Birds sang their lovely song outside. However, there was something different inside. It resembled a madman's workshop. It was much larger than it looked, though it was unclear why, with wires and pieces of metal hanging from the ceiling and scattered throughout the space at a workbench. A blonde child was honing some kind of blade. There was a bed on the opposite side of the room, and a silver-haired woman with bandaged arms and parts of her face was lying in it. She let out a soft moan as her silver eyes opened and adapted to the cabin's candlelight. She quickly became conscious, tossing back the blankets that covered her and resisting the urge to flinch at the pain as she attempted to move, only to have long chains emerge from the floor around her, encircling her body and gently pulling her back down to bed. The blonde followed him as he turned around, saying, "So you finally woke up." His face was youthful, perhaps only 8 years old. If she could accurately estimate human age, she could already tell that he would be strong with a little training because of his impressive bone structure. For his age, he said, "I would stay in bed if I were you. You do have a nasty wound after all." His blue eyes were remarkably hard for someone his age. It was like gazing into the eyes of an elderly warrior. "Don't worry, I know a fair amount more than you would think. I treated you right and cleaned your wounds." The silverette looked down past her attractive figure and saw that she had been treated based on the way she was wrapped. She assumed the child knew what he was doing, but once he was out of sight, she would make sure they were cleaned properly at the very least. "Then you have my thanks," she said, pausing because she didn't know the child's name or how he could read her mind. "May I ask your—" He interrupted her, saying, "I guess you can call me Naruto. Also about you thanking me, don't," even though it was impolite to do so without first stating your own name. "Even still you have it. My name is Grayfia, though I do wonder if you are living by yourself," the woman said. Nodding slightly, she watched the boy with hawk-like eyes, who seemed oddly aware and didn't seem to be put off by helping a stranger or slow to decline her gratitude. Perhaps her touch was fading. Then the deep blue eyes and blonde hair hit her. "Why, you're—" With a slight sigh, Naruto offered, "Yes, I am the man that you came here to attack. I had hoped that it would take you longer to figure it out. In that sense, I am also the one that gave you those wounds, though I attempted to only injure you enough to render you unconscious. I was unsuccessful." He then quickly transformed into a late teenager. "Why were you targeting me, Grayfia?" he asked, sounding almost bored rather than afraid. He wore a tight white t-shirt that did little to conceal his well-developed muscles, black puffy pants that one might expect from a Japanese ninja, leather boots on his feet, and a silver cross around his wrist. A large number of devils had been killed, though they were mostly murder, done by a blonde male in his late teens with blue eyes. "When I saw you, I figured it to be you. Was I mistaken?" she said, blinking a few times as she watched him transform back into his child form. He approached her and placed the back of his hand against her forehead, causing her to stiffen slightly under the contact. He then made an irritable tch and walked over to a shelf, which contained a lot more books than she had ever seen. "No," he said without hesitation or fear, "I have been killing your kin, though I do not hate devils. If that were the case, we would not be having this conversation. I merely did not like them violating the townspeople. Thus I killed them. You can call it murder if you will. Though I like to believe that my actions, while they may earn me the hatred of those around me, will help to protect them, if only a little." She reasoned that it would be too easy to do so in her weakened state. "That is not what I expected to hear. I had figured you were just a man of the church, doing as he pleased for some twisted sense of his own justice," Grayfia said as he took a few herbs from the shelf, tearing up some leaves and putting them in a stone bowl before grabbing a pestle and grinding them into a fine powder. "One would think so," Naruto thought to himself as he conjured up this repulsive-looking liquid. "Swamp water would be the closest description. My newest blade was a little more effective than I thought. You have minor light poisoning. It isn't anything serious and will go away in a day or two, but it will make you more uncomfortable than you already are. This drink will be disgusting, though it will purge the leftover light from your body. Take it or don't, though if you do not drink, do not complain about the pain." He poured it into a wooden cup that appeared to be hand-carved. After giving it some thought, Grayfia realized that she had light poisoning and that there was no real reason for him to take the time to heal her, only to poison her with a drink. She slowly raised the cup to her lips and took a tiny sip, which made her face turn green. She glanced at the blonde child only once before gulping down the remainder of the cup. Her body no longer felt so lethargic, and she was surprised to feel the light leaving her body quickly. This more than made up for the unpleasant tasting drink. That is quite the concoction. No, I won't tell you the recipe. It is something that I remember from my mother, so you could call it a family heirloom, he said, narrowing his eyes slightly before going outside for a short while. If her heating was appropriate, he lit a fire, and he returned a short while later, sitting close to her but not close enough to touch her or the other way around without shifting positions. I will have some dinner for you shortly, though I do wonder, Grayfia, to you, what is the difference between justice and injustice? In his words, is it not merely right and wrong? She asked with a bewildered look. The blonde child tipped his head slightly to the side, pondering, if that is the case, what is right and what is wrong, as he observed the women carefully considering his query. Is it not the law of land? I don't think so, calmly replied Naruto. I don't think that those devils that I killed believed that I served them justice. I believe that they were thinking about how wrong it was for them to die, yet at the same time, those that they had killed were probably thankful, thinking about how it was time that the ones who killed them were brought to justice. What I am trying to say is, I think that the world can never come to an understanding, though that is a very simple view of it. It is also the same with everything else. It is called choice. It allows us to progress so much, yet our nature remains the same. Humans, devils, angels, all of us believe ourselves to be right, and the others wrong. Are you following me? Grayfia was perplexed, but not because of what he was saying. Rather, she was able to follow him. She assumed that he was saying that the freedom to choose was the source of conflict. Speaking about this with one that looks like a child is distracting me. But I do understand what you are saying. I find it strange that a human would think about this though, she said, perplexed by the fact that a young child was using such well-considered language, even though she knew it was an older male. That's because I'm not, Naruto said, cocking his head to the side in perplexity. My mother was a demi-human, or beast woman, if you will, and my father was a god. In other words, while I protect humans, it would be quite the stretch to say that I am one. He seemed honest enough, and he hadn't exactly shown any signs of aggression since he stopped her from attacking him. In fact, he was even healing the wounds he had inflicted on her. I had thought that the demi-humans were mostly extinct, though seeing one that looks so human is strange. What kind are you? She asked. From memory, my mother was called one of the fox folk. I think she was a chaos fox, and I change depending on my emotions. Currently I am a ghost fox, though as I start to get angry I turn into a blood fox. I don't like being a blood fox, Naruto said, crossing his arms over his child body and humming a little in his mind. Grayfia scowled to herself because she was aware of ghost foxes, who were supposedly very skilled at hiding and creating illusions. Based on what she knew, the majority of them turned into assassins and excelled in their respective fields. However, she was unfamiliar with the second one. A blood fox. She dropped the topic when he didn't elaborate, and it was obvious that he didn't intend to talk about it further because he would have said something. Were you expecting company? He asked her, raising an eyebrow. She asked, not realizing that people had appeared outside until he mentioned it. No, I doubt that someone would come for me anyhow. Are you sure that they are not here for you? She asked. A knock on the door prompted Naruto to slowly turn his head and then shake it. Still in his childlike form, he proceeded to the door and opened it slowly, unfazed by the enormous golden light that descended from the sky behind the two individuals at his door. A huge magic circle materialized in front of each, and they leapt apart. A black-haired man with blonde bangs descended from the sky, his large black wings folding into his back, while two blondes emerged from the golden light, their clothes beyond spotless. I didn't put on enough dinner for all of you, thus I won't offer you any, Naruto said, crossing his arms over his chest and giving each of them a bored look. But if you have to fight, I will ask you to leave. I made this house myself and I don't want to have to do it again. Are your parents around, little one? He asked as the man he recognized, Gabriel, approached and knelt down to level himself with him before giving him a gentle pat on the head. He asked with a slight furrow of his brow, my mother has been dead for almost 2 millennia. I left my father's side and chose to live alone, so no, they are not around. What are you all doing on my lawn? Naruto-kun? Gabriel asked, her eyes widening. He swiftly responded, even preventing her from asking why he was acting like a child. Correct, in what world would I have a child? This world is screwed up because of the constant fighting between angels, devils, and the fallen angels. Why would I want to bring a child into it? The answer is that I am not cruel enough to do so. I am just enjoying myself like this for the moment, he said. Can I? Naruto cut off the seraph, who was the mothering type and frequently went out of her way to hug cute things, saying, you may not, Gabriel. Again I will ask why you are all on my lawn, or is that question too difficult for you all to answer? He did not want to become one of those things because it was a little demeaning. Gabriel smiled briefly. I noticed that devils had approached your house, Naruto-kun, So I quickly grabbed my brother and we made our way over here. Naruto replied, "Ah, you doubt my ability to protect myself, I understand. How cruel of you, Gabriel." "Wah. No, I didn't mean it like that. And you, Devil-san?" Naruto asked, turning his head to the red-headed man and narrowing his eyes before swiftly turning to face the black-haired woman at his side. Ignoring the angels surrounding him for the moment, the redhead asked, "Sorry for the intrusion. Naruto-san, do you mind if I call you that?" "Yes, I do. This is because I do not have your name." The devil raised his head lightly. "I am Sirzex, one of the current leaders of the devils. We are recovering from a civil war and you are harboring a criminal. I would ask that you kindly turn her over to us." No, many in attendance were taken aback by the direct response. "May I ask why?" "Why should I? Your war has nothing to do with me anymore, nor do I want any part of it." Naruto frowned at the man. "Why should I?" His eyes turned to the black-haired woman and raised a brow. "The devil that is inside my house was able to have a decent conversation with me, something that is still desired to come from being out here." The woman with raven hair said, "My name is Sarah, and I will follow my husband to the front lines, regardless of what he thinks on the matter. I will not become some stay-at-home wife," while bowing her head slightly. So the leader of hell is being scolded by his wife. "It seems that not even those in power can escape the wrath of those that they care about," said Naruto, with a bored expression as Sarah blushed slightly and turned to face the black-haired man who waved amiably. His thin blonde brow rose slightly, almost to be covered by his untidy hair. "The name is Azazel. I noticed all the big names coming together in one place and didn't want to be left out. Yeah, that's about it really," he said, his smile faltering as he continued. "So you are as mentally old as I appear to be. That is fine, I guess. I will not judge you on that fact," the small blonde said as he passed the group. He then went to the pot, stirred it a few times, raised the ladle, took a tiny mouthful, nodded, picked it up by the handles, and carried it to the door. "Is there a reason for you all to be standing on my lawn still?" he asked. "I must insist that you relinquish Grayfia into our care," Sirzex said, narrowing his eyes at the blonde and taking a step forward as he observed Gabriel and Michael immediately holding spears of light. It appeared as though this person was significant to heaven. "So that she can be executed without trail," the blonde thought as Sirzex widened his eyes for a moment. "How narrow-minded of you. Your hands are covered with the blood of the former Lucifer." "I actually didn't mind him, a bit old-fashioned, but nevertheless he was nice to talk to. You simply bore me. I will ask you once. Please remove yourself from my lawn, Sirzex." He looked closely at the two seraphs who lifted their spears a bit higher, and while Azazel appeared to be frowning, Sarah was scanning the area, taking in everything. "And if I don't?" he asked. She sensed the powers of the three surrounding them, even slightly on the devil within, but from the boy, something seemed strange to her. Nothing was present. Even humans had a semblance of strength, usually in tiny monostores that they couldn't even draw forward, but as if he didn't exist at all. It appeared as though she was simply looking at a picture of him. After carefully placing the pot on the ground, Naruto's eyes flickered a few times, changing to a much lighter blue and displaying an odd pattern before returning to normal. "Then I will remove you. If you will not allow me to take her with me, can I speak to her at least?" they asked, hovering menacingly over Sirzex as large golems emerged from the ground, uprooting trees and turning them into clubs as a bright light flickered through their bodies. "1 month from now she will be fully healed. You may return at that time and I will oversee the discussion that you hold at such time. You will come alone. There will be no angels here, fallen or otherwise. It will just be myself, Grayfia, and you. That is the limit to which I will allow a trespasser," Naruto said coldly. "I will return in a month from today. Then until then, Naruto-san." "Come, Sarah, we still have lots to do," said Sirzex. After giving it some thought, the red-haired man spun around and called forth a large magical circle beneath him, and Sarah nodded and joined him inside before they disappeared. Naruto turned to face Azazel and said, "I get the picture. I'll see you around, Naruto. It was good to see you again." Naruto nodded to the man as Azazel took off into the sky. "Yes, though I hope you have grown up a little the next time until we meet again, leader of the fallen angels," Naruto said. His smile was strained. "I do not take pleasure in hearing that you will be staying with the devil for a month, even more so that you plan to observe a meeting between two in a month's time." "I agree," Gabriel said, drawing Michael's attention and shocked. No woman should be allowed to stay with Naruto-kun. At that moment, he sighed to himself. Of course, that was all she was concerned about. The words, "Don't worry, Gabriel, I have protection," were spoken by Naruto without emotion. He said, "You're planning to have SSSSS sex?" And the blonde woman almost passed out. Then, with a sideways head tilt, Naruto asked, "Why would I be having sex?" But you said protection. Don't humans use that to stop from having babies?" Gabriel said, flushed. A knife was pulled from the air and held in the blonde child's hand as he slowly swiped it out to the side. Sometimes you say really strange things, Gabriel. You look flushed. Do you have a fever? Naruto asked, hovering up into the air and pressing the back of his hand against Gabriel's forehead as her cheeks continued to heat up. Strange, you feel fine. Is there some strange sickness that angels can get that I don't know about, Michael? Not that I know of, Naruto. Perhaps she should stay with you the night, so that you could check on her and help her if anything comes up, Michael said with an inward smile that quickly turned to a frown after noticing Gabriel's shocked expression. To be honest, sometimes that girl was too pure. It was during his time in heaven that he realized she had fallen in love with the blonde. He thought it was good to see Gabriel genuinely want something because she was always putting other people before herself. However, she was too timid to discuss it with him. A part of him questioned how long this would go on before Gabriel began to feel bad about what she was doing. Perhaps she needed a little encouragement. Naruto gave a slight nod and returned to the surface. Though I only have 2 beds, she can stay in mine. I will sleep at my workbench as the guest bed is already in use. Gabriel, can I trust you to go inside and serve up some dinner for Grayfia? She should remain in bed, so I am asking you to put aside your conflicts for the moment and help me. She quickly answered, Hi. I can do that. Naruto-kun, is everything still in the same place? That would be correct. Changing it once I got into the habit of retrieving them from there would not be fun. Naruto replied. He briefly observed her as she left and carried the big pot inside before turning to face Michael and asking, Now why are you here? Michael said softly, I am worried about you staying alongside the humans. After what happened last time, I was thinking it would be best if you came and lived in heaven. He already knew that if things went wrong, the blonde would simply disappear once more, making it decades before they would find him again. With a flat gaze, Naruto crossed his arms over his chest and said, I am not my brother. His idea, while noble, was foolish. I am greedy. If something doesn't interest me, I won't partake in it. I understand. You cannot hate me for trying though, can you? I cannot. Maybe once Grayfia has finished healing and has set herself on track, I may return for a while, though until such a time, I cannot. You are very precious to my sister Naruto, Michael said with a slight nod. I know, Naruto said, making Michael furrow his brow. The Seraphim don't really know who I am, but they have figured out that I am important. They don't want to make a mistake like they did with Christ. Did they really treat him that way? The Angels' leader scowled, or did he simply interpret their behavior that way? I do hope that I get a favorable answer from you in a month's time then. Until then, Naruto, he said, shaking his thoughts away inward and bowing slightly. A golden light then descended, encircling him before launching him high into the sky. Naruto nodded slightly at the empty room before entering calmly and sitting down at the little table he had constructed for eating. While Grayfia was still blinking quickly, Gabriel had already sat down and completed serving their meals. In a month's time, Grayfia, there will be a man named Sirzex coming here to speak to you. I said you would be here, and while your injuries will be completely healed in just over 3 weeks, you will remain until the discussion is over and an agreement has been made, Gabriel said. Why, you are going to send me off to the wolves? She said, almost dropping the bowl she was holding in disbelief. Hardly. I do not believe I am that cruel. I will be there when the talk happens. If I do not agree to the terms, you will simply stay in my care until I do, or does that trouble you? Naruto asked coolly as he put a spoonful of the stew in front of him in his mouth, enjoying the flavor of the previously roasted meat, its tenderness, and the enhanced flavor provided by the vegetables and herbs. He had performed well once more. I am in no position to complain about the arrangements, Grayfia said, taking a tiny bit of soup in her mouth before her eyes widened at the straightforward meal, and she devoured it wholeheartedly. After a short while, she stiffened, slowly removing the bowl from her mouth and bowing her head slightly. I apologize for that unsightly behavior. Punish me as you see fit, she said. Gabriel scowled, her eyes widening as Naruto set down his bowl and approached her calmly. At that moment, her voice sounded almost lifeless. Some devils were truly beyond redemption. There, I expected you to be hungry. I did the best I could in making sure your body had the nutrition it needed to continue functioning while you were in a coma. It is the reason that I made so much food, he said, raising his hand to her face as she tightly closed her eyes. Did you think I was going to share with trespassers? This is my place, and they entered it without asking. For people to be so rude, they didn't even say sorry, he said, noticing Gabriel's raised eyebrows. Naruto-kun, I'm sorry for coming over unannounced. Naruto calmly returned to the table, picked up his wooden spoon, and scooped up more stew before turning to face Grayfia, who was staring at the bowl in her hands. Hush, Gabriel, I said that you and Michael were welcome at any time. I was simply hostile because I was caring for a devil and had thought that you both had come to eliminate her, he said. Is there something wrong with what I have cooked? I honestly believe that this is better than normal. No, it is just that the help is not meant to eat alongside their betters. What are you doing? Gabriel scowled as he saw Naruto get back up and approach Grayfia. He took the bowl from her, raised the spoon, took the stew inside, and held it to her mouth. If you are going to continue acting like a child, I shall treat you like one, or do you want a bib? Naruto asked stoically, pressing the spoon against her unresponsive lips. If you continue like this, it will cause a mess, which will mean that I will have to change your bandages earlier than normal. Are you okay with making your betters work harder than they should for you? The blonde gave him a brief glare before closing her eyes and slightly parting her lips to let him feed her. Do not become used to this. Although this more than likely would seem odd to others, the child feeding the adult, I do not plan to make this a regular occurrence. Excuse me, but I must relieve myself, Grayfia said, trying to stand up, but Naruto put a hand on her shoulder and said, if I do not, I will end up making a mess. This pained expression appeared on her face as Naruto went down to scoop up more. Naruto said, I have set up a system that will allow you to remain in bed while it takes care of your bodily functions. Once your legs are healed enough, which should be a few days from now, I will allow you to walk again. Until then, you must stay in your bed. He watched as the woman's cheeks flushed and she avoided making eye contact before turning to face him in shock. As I said, I did set something up so that you will be able to be in the bed for a time longer now. Do I need to continue feeding you? If it is possible, could you feed me in your adult form? Grayfia asked, seemingly capturing all of his attention as she continued to stare at him. Impossible, Naruto replied unconsciously, causing a surprised expression on her face. I used too much energy fighting off the effects of my new weapons on your body and repairing it back to normal. As you can tell, it is still taking time for your body to adjust to being alive again. Sadly, I could not put everything back how it was exactly before. Your reserves of demonic energy are smaller, though they are slowly being expanded by my light magic, which is putting quite a lot of strain on both of our bodies because I have to control it so that it doesn't harm you too much. The small display of strength I used earlier to make Sears leave was the majority of my remaining energy. Right now I am as weak as a low-level angel. I have taken the form of a child because not only is it more interesting like this, but my energy will come back faster. Do you have an issue with this? In response to Grayfia's statement, I am sorry for causing you so much trouble. I have no issues with my current treatment. Do with me as you will. She felt the mattress next to her sink slightly, and the blonde child was sitting on it as he spoon-fed her once more. Gabriel was trying her hardest to ignore the image in front of her, and it was a very uncomfortable moment. Fortunately, they were done in no more than 5 minutes. Much words, only to make things worse. Grayfia remained motionless while the blonde carefully removed her bandages, revealing to her the full extent of her wounds. For the first time, the sheer number of stitches covering her body was disgusting. How had he moved so quickly to inflict such damage before she could even strike him? Despite the woman's embarrassment, he washed her down gently, making sure not to miss any spots, dried her off, and then wrapped her up once more. I think we should have tea. Maybe we can get to know one another over a beverage of some kind. What would you suppose, Gabriel? Grayfia said, blushing a little at the contact and unable to look the child in the eyes. When Gabriel heard her name called, her head shot up. Sorry, I wasn't listening in case you were talking about something secret. She lied. In fact, she had been imagining herself in Grayfia's shoes, and it was almost like a dream to have Naruto take such good care of her. I said, what do you think about talking with one another over tea? It has been quite the number of years since my house was this full, so I feel like being a proper host for once. At the suggestion, Gabriel smiled warmly and said, I do not see the harm. Later in the evening, that as Gabriel was lying in bed, piecing together what she had learned from Grayfia, it appeared that the Silverette was essentially a slave who had been sent to investigate how humans were killing devils. If it was a new weapon, she was to try to obtain it for their own use in the ongoing civil war between the two devil factions. She felt as though she was insulting them simply by dining in the same room, and some of her actions made it clear that this was the case. She had appeared familiar, but it turned out that they had fought each other during the Great War. Grayfia wore an extremely tight outfit and had longer hair back then. Grayfia was shocked to learn that the person caring for her was also present. It seemed that he was protecting God until the dragons arrived, at which point he departed for a short while to assemble a team to deal with them. In the interim, God sustained injuries that were beyond his capacity to heal. He died as a result of it. She raised an eyebrow at that. Normally, God was guarded by the seraphim, 10 angels who were far more powerful than the others. However, they were sent away for one demi-human. Did he have a unique defense of some sort? Her thoughts did momentarily return to the golden chains that had bound her in bed earlier, but she never received a response to that. She turned her head slightly to the side and saw Naruto sitting on Grayfia's bed going over some things with her, mainly related to her recuperation. While paying attention, she saw that Grayfia was having trouble taking the child seriously. To be honest, Gabriel experienced some of the same emotions when Naruto appeared to be a child. How were they supposed to take him seriously? He gave Grayfia what appeared to be a notepad and some pencils, saying, "For if you get bored during the night, I sometimes find writing what is on my mind is entertaining to look back on." The two discovered that, although Gabriel had an idea already, Grayfia knew very little about the blonde. The main reason he didn't display much emotion was that he apparently didn't interact with people very often. The small tics he did use were ones he had seen a few times and believed he was using correctly. He learned the majority of what he knew from books or from self-study. As a result, many of his actions were unusual by today's standards, and he had even insisted on working on his weapons with a sense of joy as a child. "Would you be against it if I was to draw instead?" she asked. Glancing at the paper and taking it slowly, the blonde man looked at her for a short while. After a few moments, Naruto said, "As long as you show me, I do not mind," stepping back a few paces before stopping and turning to her. "I think this is where I say good night, Grayfia," he said, observing her eyes widen a little before leaving to go to his workbench. Nearly an hour had passed when Grayfia fell asleep, and she saw Gabriel quietly and calmly get out of bed, her goddess-like figure concealed behind a long white nightgown. The sound of lead striking paper reverberated softly throughout the room. She moved her feet gently across the polished and sanded wooden floor until she was standing close to the person she loved. "What's this, Naruto-kun?" she asked, her brows fixed on the paper before him, unable to understand it. He didn't even respond to her words. His pencil continued gliding across the paper with a trance-like. At the moment, the three factions, angels, fallen angels and devils, have a large imbalance in number. Devils and fallen angels can create half-breeds. While they are not as strong, they still have methods of increasing their population. Angels have no such luck, for if an angel were to fall in love with a human, they would fall from grace, their wings becoming stained by the sins of humanity. So I am looking into a method to produce new angels." Gabriel almost whispered, "I didn't think that you were interested in the war?" Naruto nevertheless continued to draw out seals and ancient runic magic from the paper. "You are one of the few people that I have grown somewhat attached to, Gabriel. I would be sad if you and Michael died. I do not think that war will come again, at least not between the three factions. God and Lucifer had always been at odds. Now we see what came from this. With both of them dead, there will be a few that try to continue their beliefs, but I believe that they will be squashed by the overwhelming fear of returning to war. This is mostly so that the angels themselves do not die out. You should rest for now. Come to bed," Gabriel said as he leaned down and gently placed her hand over his smaller one, causing his eyes to dart in her direction. "Impossible, that is a single bed, thus only a single person can sleep on it," he replied quietly. Playing on his need to do everything right might have been a bit of a dirty tactic, but fortunately she and the four great seraphs were unable to fall. "Naruto-kun, if you are in your child form, we will both fit. Now come. You wouldn't want to make a mistake because you were tired, would you?" She would do such things to attract his attention if necessary. With a slow sigh, Naruto put down his pencil and said, "If you say so, I will trust you, Gabriel." He stood up and allowed himself to be guided to the bed. The covers had already been pulled back, so he wasn't shocked when Gabriel climbed in and turned to face him, seemingly indicating that she was waiting. He pushed his thoughts aside and climbed into bed, already wearing his sleepwear, which was a pair of pants that were different from his daytime clothes only in their purpose. "Gabriel?" he asked as he felt an arm gradually encircle his chest and pull him toward the body behind him. She moved Gabriel around a bit, but he moved and positioned himself at her face level, his blue eyes staring into her own emerald green. "I am just making sure that you do not try to return to your project again before you have rested. If Grayfia does call for you, I will relent. Until then, I will hold you against me so that you are forced to rest," Gabriel replied. He noticed that she flushed and raised his hand blankly, pressing the back of it against her forehead once more before frowning, saying, "Strange, again you have no fever. Regardless, I am here for you, Gabriel. Should you ever need me for anything, please do ask." "Understandable, though I don't want to be stuck looking at your stomach as I try to sleep. I find your face much more pleasing. Still, from here I will be able to tell if you start to feel sick like before. So I must thank you for remembering that I was meant to be taking care of you," he said. Even though Gabriel was flushed, did he think her face was attractive? Did that imply that he found her attractive? She shook off the thought and tightened her hold on the blonde, childlike man. She felt his arm gently move around her, as if to return her embrace, and then he smiled slightly, his deep blue eyes disappearing as he let go of the illusion over them, revealing to her the eyes she had always loved, the cold blue ones that seemed to read your thoughts. His eyelids slowly closed over the black cross in the center of them, saying, "Good night, Naruto-kun." Good night, Gabriel. After a swift month, it became clear that Grayfia was an exceptionally talented artist. Additionally, It turned out that Naruto was mired in his present project and needed to regain his strength before attempting to advance. He turned to face Grayfia, who was now able to walk and had regained most of her strength. She could easily defeat a high-level angel, but a seraph was out of the question. Although a slight flush appeared on her cheeks, she attempted to maintain a neutral expression while looking at her guide while wearing a tight leather suit that flaunted her devilish curves. Since Gabriel left to go back to heaven to await his response, he had regained enough strength to be in his adult form all the time he slept topless, tossing and turning in his sleep and frequently taking off the blankets entirely, giving her the few well-toned male in front of her. Then there were his muscles, which gave the impression that he had been carved from stone by a master craftsman. Was this a result of his beast blood? His hair was untidy and managed to hide his eyes, so it was obvious that he would need to have it cut soon. If this is the case, she could say that it wasn't unpleasant, and even though she was terrified of what today would bring, she was grateful to have him by her side. She had begun to feel more and more like a person over the past month, not just a tool to be used. She approached the bed quietly and stood firmly next to him. "Naruto-sama, today is the day of my judgment," she said softly, watching as his eyes opened. It was likely that he had woken up as soon as she got out of bed. His icy blue eyes, which she had occasionally seen, were staring at her. Strangely, she had the impression that she had seen them previously, but despite how significant it seemed, she was unable to recall. After shoving the thought from her mind, she noticed that his deep blue eyes had returned and that they were almost as captivating as his other ones. He yawned slightly and then sat up straight, observing her appearance, saying, "I'll get started on breakfast." The blonde pouted as Grayfia sternly said, "I have already put it on. Tea is waiting for you at the dining table and I am about to go and bring in our breakfast. I do not need your help before you ask. Just let me serve you properly for this morning, as it may be our last time together, Naruto-sama." He had become much more expressive after living with her and Gabriel for a while, which was something else she was pleased about. His emotional spectrum had expanded beyond curiosity and irritation. It was a significant improvement over the child who had forced her to eat. She blushed slightly as she recalled that it had been a few more evenings before she received the message he would not allow her to believe that she was beneath him. "But I can't find it in me to deny you. But remember, Grayfia, I'm not going to let you get hurt from this," Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head. "I don't like it when you do things like this." With a slight bow of her head, she said, "Tea, thank you, Naruto-sama," and went outside to where a fire had been going for a while. She missed Naruto rising from his bed and making his way to the table to enjoy the tea she had made. Despite their disparate racial backgrounds, Gabriel had taught her during her visit, and although the two had developed a cordial relationship, it was still too much to call them friends. When she came back, she saw that her blonde keeper was reading at the table, his lips pressed into a thin line as he flipped through a small plate-sized book that appeared to be quite old. Even though she didn't understand why, the blonde seemed to really enjoy Japanese culture, as evidenced by the way he styled his meals and most of his weapons. She brought the pot and pan up and served fish that had been caught the day before with a side of rice. "How is your project coming, Naruto-sama?" she asked, taking a seat and exhaling slightly as Naruto closed his book. This question had been raised for a while. The blonde had devoted a great deal of time to devising a method for creating new angels. "I had a change of pace once I started to make progress. I figured that I may need to make some adjustments in order to secure a good life for you. It set me back a little, a month, maybe two at most," he said, taking some of the fish with a pair of chopsticks. He watched as Grayfia gave him a startled look, her chopsticks almost falling out of her hand despite the blonde's instructions. "I have caused you much more trouble than I am worth, Naruto-sama," she said, lowering her head and almost dipping her hair, which she had begun to let grow long again, into her meal. Using one of the clothes on the table, Naruto wiped his face and gave a small nod to the woman in front of him. He then calmly put down his chopsticks and folded his hands in front of him, his chest still bare, and assumed a thoughtful expression. He then stood up and approached Grayfia, gently grabbing her chin and tilting her head up to face him. Her silver eyes appeared to be filled with shame, and as he leaned forward and pressed his lips against hers, her body froze. He only made a slight but gentle touch with her lips, and that was all that was required to freeze her. Though he occasionally made things awkward, this man had shown her nothing but kindness despite the fact that he should despise her. Rather than treating her like a tool to be used and discarded, he treated her like a person, which confused her but also made her feel warm. "Naruto-sama," she trailed, unsure if that actually happened because it felt strange, almost like a dream, but she could also feel the action herself. He stepped back and watched her as her hand reached up to gently touch her lips. "You are precious to me, Grayfia. Despite what you think of yourself, you are a good person, one that deserves to be shown the kindness that she wants to bathe others in. Like Gabriel, I will always be there for you as long as you remain true to yourself," he said. She stepped forward into Naruto and pressed her head against his chest, letting her eyes burst open and letting her tears fall onto him. I don't want to go, Naruto-sama, she said, her smaller arms circling his chest as she held on to him. That was all her body could take. Her heart began to race as she felt pressure build up behind her eyes. Gabriel claimed that she felt greatly reassured when Naruto put his arms around her shoulders and held her close, saying, "We won't be apart for long. For someone that can live for thousands of years, you seem rather attached after a month. You treat me like a person. I want to keep living here. I want to laugh more, to have you feed me more, and to just sit around the fire and talk late at nights. I want to make you breakfast, and I want to hold you when it is cold. You're warm and friendly to those whom you find interesting." She was sniffling as she dug her face in his chest. "You are friends with angels, yet still kind to devils, but most importantly you make me feel like I have purpose. When I served Lucifer I felt unimportant, like if I were to vanish they wouldn't even know, but here I feel." She was interrupted when her chin was seized once more. This time, however, he claimed her lips with his own, letting his hand slide down her cheek and then giving it a gentle thumb stroke. Although Grayfia wanted to react, she was unable to move her body away from the blonde when a flash of magic went off behind them. Nevertheless, Grayfia did enjoy the moment despite how abrupt it was. "Well, I think it will be difficult to make an argument to have you hand Grayfia over to me," Sirzex said, sighing. He had been considering the situation, but he was still unable to pinpoint the reason why those eyes made him feel so uneasy. He was aware of their significance, as evidenced by the fact that, just moments before Sirzex himself had attacked the boy, the normally calm Michael appeared prepared to declare war, but seeing that young child grow up wasn't exactly what he had anticipated. "It is simple really. I cannot be with Grayfia every moment, so you will protect her for me," Naruto firmly said as the two separated and he took her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. As Grayfia and Sirzek's eyes widened in disbelief, he responded rationally, saying, "I am sorry, but she was a servant of the Lucifer family. I simply cannot do this on a why. Oh, there is no whim about it. I know what Grayfia has done, and such I am prepared to offer compensation for her work. She is precious to me and interesting. I spent time this month deviating from my goal. Now I have the keys to allowing devils to turn humans into artificial devils, allowing your side to bolster their numbers after the losses you sustained during the war." Naruto's remarks made Sirzek stiffen. He had to ask again to make sure he understood. "Are you saying that, if we protect Grayfia, a former slave of Lucifer, you will give us away to make new devils?" "No, you need to treat Grayfia as a person and protect her. In exchange I will give you my completed research on the resurrecting humans into devils." Naruto shook his head slightly. It was mentioned the other day that Sirzek should cross his arms over his chest, but it was said that it would take years for this to happen. "What is the catch?" was his response, and it seemed to be right in front of him. "It is impossible for copies to be made, and when the files are locked the information they contain cannot be remembered. Plus, I linked them to Grayfia. She is the only one able to open them apart from me. If she feels threatened or passes away, they will lock automatically and can then only be opened by myself. In other words, there is no catch so long as you look after Grayfia," calmly responded Naruto. Disregarding the aghast woman who was standing by his side, he was certain that she would be dissatisfied with the extent of his efforts on her behalf. The man with the red hair exhaled. "I have actually given this quite a lot of thought the past month, and I no longer have any intention of trying to remove Grayfia if she doesn't want to leave, though I do believe it would be best for her to return to the underworld." Naruto turned to see Grayfia's beseeching gaze. Then can we change the price for the information?" she asked in a quiet voice. Both Naruto and Sirzek were drawn to this, and the latter raised an eyebrow at her, finding it odd that she was speaking for the first time. "And what is it that you would ask for?" he asked. Grayfia took a deep breath and met Sirzek's gaze, saying, "I want for Naruto-sama to be able to travel to the underworld so he can see where I live." Naruto gave her a startled look before giving her a slight squeeze on the hand to let her know that he supported her action. At least that's what he was told it meant. Hearing a devil use the same honorific to describe someone like Naruto made Sirzek tremble inwardly. "So you want for Naruto to be able to travel to the underworld freely?" he asked. "That is correct. I understand that he may need someone to watch him while he is there, and that some sections of the underworld are restricted, but if he comes to visit I don't want him to have to walk around with a full group of people guarding him while he is in restraints," Grayfia said, glancing at the slightly shocked blonde before nodding and turning back to Sirzek. "I think we can come to an agreement with that, as long as you live with my family until we can be sure of your intentions, Grayfia," Sirzek said, shaking his head lightly and chuckling. "I do not see an issue with that," the Silverette said with a slight bow of her head. She looked at Naruto, who smiled slightly. Naruto said, "I haven't been to the underworld before. I would admit to being interested. If this is what you wish for Grayfia I will allow it," with a somewhat detached tone. Grayfia glanced at them both and gave a firm, "I do believe that this is in the best interest of everyone. Though I may not be able to stay by your side constantly, I already knew that this was bound to happen as you wish to return to heaven for a time, a place where I cannot step without starting a war while you, because of what you are, and how you have not claimed a side to rest with yet, would almost be welcomed with open arms as the sides tried to sway you to nest with them. I agree to the terms, though I think it would be best if you had time to settle in before Naruto-san makes his first visit. Sears had to concede following his report on his most recent encounter with the blonde and his findings. Some of the higher-ups had decided what to do with him. He took a deep breath before turning to face Grayfia, smiling warmly, and leaning down to give her a small embrace. Would half a year be acceptable? Or is that too soon? He asked. I was planning a trip to heaven as it was anyways, Sears-san. Michael and Gabriel have been asking me to visit for quite a number of years, and now that the world is starting to move again, I believe I will play with their whim. That should be fine. I see no reason for why it shouldn't be, Sears said, pressing his lips together in contemplation. However, 6 months later, Grayfia's eyes widened slightly. However, she had only met him once. What if he had moved on to someone else during that time? However, he seemed to read her mind when he said, I know most of those in heaven already, so you don't have to worry about someone making me forget about you, Grayfia. Like I said, you're precious to me. Naruto-sama, I will await for your return then, Grayfia said as she moved away from Naruto and sat down next to the red-headed man. A big red circle began to form beneath Sears. Sears bowed slightly before the circle was completed and the two disappeared. One of us will return half a year from today to this spot to pick you up, Naruto-san. Until then we will do our best to treat Grayfia with the proper care that she deserves, he said. With a tiny exhale, Naruto moved to his cabinet, opened the door, and took out a white t-shirt. He pulled it over his head, allowing a bright blue light to envelop him before he shattered into tiny pieces. His cabin locked itself, preventing anyone else from entering until the individuals on the list came back. Gabriel was moving down the white hallways, which were as bright as ever. Heaven appeared to be filled with pure whites, bright blues, and the most valuable gold and silver. Although their hues may seem uninteresting to some, you eventually grew accustomed to them. It was just another typical morning. She had just taken a shower and, since she had nothing better to do for the time, was going to read a book in the shade. She would have squealed like a little child if she hadn't been in public or on Earth, but she had to maintain her composure when she passed his room and heard the sound of running water behind the door. As a result, she continued to wait for him outside of his room while blushing slightly and grinning. She had devised that plan half an hour ago, and 15 minutes ago, the water stopped, so he should have been out 10 minutes ago, or perhaps 5 if he was running late. Her foot began to tap in frustration as she waited for a few more minutes, and then a spear of light formed in her hand, and she sliced through the door. Since he wasn't typically late, something had to have happened. She hurried inside and discovered that the room was empty. There were indications that someone had undoubtedly taken a shower earlier, but when she looked around, all she saw was a ball of fur on the bed, which appeared to be just as well made as it had been a century ago. The tiny white ball of fur appeared curious as it tilted its little fox head to the side and stuck its head up. You shouldn't be in here, little one, she said, shaking her head slightly as she moved forward and picked up the fox, resting it on her arm and giving it a gentle pat. She was certain she had seen this one before, but she couldn't help but wonder who had brought foxes to heaven. And why not Gabriel? Is this not my room? The fox asked, turning to face her with eyes that were almost human-like. The fox spoke. It said. She threw it into the air with a shrill cry of Kia. After her body and mind appeared to shut down for a short while, she watched as the fox appeared to float in midair and gaze at her boredly. He slowly lowered himself to the ground and observed Gabriel taking a step back before tripping over her robes and landing on her back. She pouted as she rubbed her injury but stiffened when she felt the fox curl up in her lap. Not exactly the reaction I was expecting, he said. She whispered to herself, I must just be imagining things. Foxes don't speak after all. But then she felt a weight pressing down on her as she was pushed to the ground. The small fox was standing on her chest, somehow holding her there while one of its tiny paws was placed on her chin, making her look at it. The white fox said, You're right, foxes don't speak, but people tend to forget that my mother was fox folk. As such I can turn myself into a fox, and she was certain this time. She made out the icy blue eyes with crosses in them staring back at her after blinking a few times to get it just right. You're Naruto-kun, right? She asked. Hi, I just finished speaking with Grayfia and Sears and sent myself up her, the fox said, nodding its head. However, he was tragically interrupted when he was crushed between thin arms and abundant, warm, and soft mountains. This is the cutest you yet, she said, releasing her grip when she felt a nasty nip on her breast. She looked down and noticed some blood dripping from it, and she pouted at the white fox, asking, Moo, what was that for? You were crushing my tail. I will relent on my normal, no hugging, rule while I am like this. As long as you be weary of my tail, It is incredibly sensitive, he said before Gabriel picked him up once more and held him tightly while allowing his tail to fall beneath him. Oh, let's keep you being back a secret from brother, it will be fun, won't it? Gabriel chuckles slightly as he imagines Michael being perplexed because Naruto hasn't shown up or sent a message indicating that he would be running late. Before accepting his role, Naruto gave her a brief glance and said, I don't really think it is going to work out how you planned. It appeared that he would be reduced to a soft toy for the time being. Before Michael moved to stand in front of where Naruto's door used to be, there was a flash of light in the hallway outside the room. What happened here? He asked, his expression somewhat bewildered. He smiled nervously. I heard something moving around in here, so I called out. When nobody responded, I broke down the door and found this little guy playing in here. Ah, is that true, Naruto? Michael asked. Glancing at the fox currently curled up between his sister's breasts, it was evident that his sister was shocked. Basically, though I think she forgot to mention the part where she stood outside of my room for over half an hour waiting for me to come out, Naruto grinned. You knew, brother? Gabriel asked, glancing between the two. Gabriel raised an eyebrow in perplexity as Michael explained. Naruto is able to turn into a fox. I have known this for centuries, because he discovered early on that we can't track him in his fox form, thus he often used it to get out of his lessons when he was younger. He was a lot more lively back then. In fact, when did any of them receive instruction? A strained smile came to Michael's face as he saw those thoughts. It was before your time, Gabriel? I always thought that Naruto was younger than me. Wait, is he older than you, brother? Michael pressed his lips together in contemplation. Aside from the man himself, no other living being was aware of Naruto's true identity. He was aware that Lucifer died in a civil war when the three factions withdrew. After the Great War, he was so weak that it appeared that his only option was to die. They were made to protect the blonde, which was the straightforward explanation for this. He privately grumbled, having done a terrible job yet, he is, though not by much. Myself, Lucifer and Naruto all grew up together and I am about 100 years older than you, Gabriel, if my memory is correct. As you know, you were created using the dimensions of another woman during her teenage years and joined the rest of us. The woman whose body yours created after is Naruto's mother. Your facial structure is made from the design of God himself along with your hair and eyes. At times I wonder if you were created to not only protect God, but also to stay by Naruto's side. Gabriel glances down at Naruto, who gives her a curious look before effortlessly escaping her grasp and transforming into his adult form, which is only wearing white pants. He sits on the bed next to him and shrugs, saying, I have no idea, I was mostly kept out of the loop apart from my lessons. With hesitation, she asked, so I might have been made to be Naruto-kun WWW wife? Michael gave a slight scowl, I am not sure, though you are the only female seraph, not to mention you had a strong attachment to Naruto the first time you met him, as you can tell. Though I am younger in appearance than Naruto, our structure is similar. While you were made based on his mother, I was made based on him. If God were still alive, we could speak to him about this. But for now all we can do is speculate. I think I was to become like a brother to him. Either way, what you were made to do, and what you chose to become are two completely different things. Just be who you want to be. Michael, Gabriel, you were given the ability to think for yourselves for a reason. Why do you think it is impossible for you two to fall? Naruto asked. How did you know? Michael narrowed his eyes as Gabriel's widened hers. Naruto fell silent after that, and the three of them knew all too well when that happened. Ghosts can feel sins, Michael. I also watched you give into your anger during the Great War, yet not a single flicker of yours wings, Naruto said. The vast majority of angels were in despair when God was killed, but then a figure Gabriel could hardly see emerged, and his voice immediately calmed the angels by telling them to flee to heaven before her brother arrived and took her back to heaven with him by her side. She recalled that the light had slightly dimmed and that she could see his pure white hair as he appeared beside Michael and calmed him down. Every pure angel, bar Michael, listened and fell back. For the briefest of moments, the figure's strength and aura were entirely superior to even the seraphim, giving off the impression that God did when he was alive. She had repeatedly questioned Michael about this person who seemed to be God, but he had never responded. He claimed to know them, but they would remain silent until it was time to relocate. As the two turned to face her, Gabriel shifted slightly and said, I have a lot to think about. Is it okay if I be excused, Naruto-kun? Brother? She was feeling a little dizzy from all of these thoughts and learning so much new information about Naruto, and there was her relationship with him. This is serious business, Naruto. If the others were to know you were housing a devil, they would call for your head. After giving her a quick glance and nodding as she excused herself from the room, Naruto lifted his hand and clicked his fingers, causing the door, which had been nearly vaporized, to appear again and settle into place. It gave off a bright glow that indicated magic had been cast on it, and then Michael's pulse erupted to clear the room of anything that might have been concealed within. I made a deal with the devils, in order for me to visit Grayfia any time I wish, really. All I had to do was change a couple of things around in my recent project, which in turn made a drastic change that I will need to work out for my original plans, but now devils can resurrect humans into devils. He observed the expression of rage on Michael's face, raising his hand to prevent the discussion from going ahead. I just need to make a few finishing touches for it to be workable for us to do the same, only to turn them into angels. It should only take about a month. After that I was looking at some plans for a new combat suit for the Seraphim. What is wrong with the current one? Michael asked, raising an eyebrow. It is too bulky, it gets in the way of finer movements, so I was thinking of scrapping the current ones once I can make my new ones. Naruto's small pout surprised the Seraph, who had heard that the blonde had begun to become more expressive and was grateful after turning his back on almost everything during the war. On those lines, I have been thinking about what the people from the church have been wearing when we have them do jobs for us. Right now they are practically naked, wearing human clothing, something that feeds off their devotion to their task, offer them a bit more protection when hunting the abnormal. Seeing a determined expression in the blonde's eyes, Michael reasoned, it looks like something has really stirred you, Naruto. Normally you would not have gotten involved at all. You simply would have killed that devil and been done with you. Why the change? Hear me out before you say anything, please. Naruto pressed his lips together in thought. God said that because of my nature I connected with the world, meaning I was able to tell when it was happy at the moment it isn't. But I can't tell why every day it is getting a little worse. I feel that in the end, all we will be able to do is act with force until we can right what is wrong, he began after receiving a slight nod from Michael. Michael hesitated. That is troubling, are you sure? The last time the blonde had made such a prediction, the Great War had just begun, and since they were now weak, they were probably going to be destroyed. Sadly I am. After putting the pieces together gradually, Michael asked, you want us to fight alongside the devils? When he saw that Naruto was unresponsive, he shook his head and said, if it were anyone else, I would cast it away without a thought and branded you a traitor. However, coming from you I don't think this will go over as smoothly as you plan. What was that? All that fire? Those creatures in the darkness? Naruto stood up and tapped his index finger to his fellow blonde's forehead, observing as his eyes widened and then glazed over. A few seconds later, he appeared to return as his breathing became labored and a few beads of sweat formed on his brow. That I fear, Michael, is what is coming, what the world is so scared of. I feel it in my blood. War will be upon us once again, one that will make the Great War look like a scrap between children. They said the room they were in now seemed more like a tomb than the one they remembered from their early years, something that was never supposed to be opened. It would be best if you and Gabriel were together at such a point then, don't you think? Naruto asked after Michael laughed lightly in an attempt to diffuse the tension. I do care for her, but I do not know if she returns those feelings. It hurts if I am away from her for too long. In fact, she is the main reason that I continue to return here, though I still enjoy the change from time to time. Now show me to God's system. Let's see if I can't fix it a little. Now it was later in the evening. Since then, Naruto and Michael have gone and come a few times. They have been occupied with organizing paperwork and new projects for the researchers, as well as evicting some individuals from Naruto's lab and forger, or should we call him her husband. Gabriel was genuinely unaware. She questioned whether her feelings were genuine at all after learning that her own brother occasionally believed she was made to be there and support Naruto, or was she simply acting in accordance with her programming? Could she even be considered a person anymore? Were people not capable of independent thought and decision-making? She hardly noticed Naruto staring at her sharply as the door in front of her opened. How long are you going to stand out here for this time? She asked. Both were dressed in their pajamas, but Naruto couldn't tell because they appeared to be the same pair of pants he wore during the day. Her nightgown was slightly thinner for Gabriel, but that didn't take away from its elegance. It held fast to her body and swayed softly in the slightest nighttime breeze. The typical white ceiling that hung over the head had dimmed, altering the pace of the day because it was, after all, the time allotted for sleep. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to come in or not. Your first day back and you spent the majority of it in the forge. You seem really devoted at the moment, Naruto-kun, she said, leaning forward to remove some cloth from her gown after noticing some soot on his cheek. Naruto sighed inwardly and moved aside, asking, do you want to come in, Gabriel? I do, but I don't know if I want to come in because that is what I want, or because it is what I should do, the blonde woman said, biting her lip in apparent confusion. Michael said that it was a feeling. Everyone has a purpose in this world of ours, Gabriel. Most of us don't live long enough to find out what it was, or we complete it without even noticing. What should it matter what yours is, as long as you live your life how you think is best? asked Naruto as he stepped away from her and returned to his room. Naruto then walked forward and light kissed her forehead. He knew she was still standing in the doorway without having to look because her emotions were so mixed up that she would have fallen if God hadn't been watching over her. He climbed under the sheets and went to bed, listening to the sound of soft footsteps filling his ears as his door slowly closed. Gabriel was sitting just feet away from him when the edge of his bed slightly compressed. "What if I don't know what to do anymore?" she asked, sounding so vulnerable at that moment. Naruto put a hand on her shoulder as she sat up and said, "Then listen to your heart. If that fails you, then listen to the world." "Naruto-kun, how do you think of me?" she asked, turning back to face him as tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. "Well, when I first met you I thought you were just some little girl who didn't understand what was happening around her, though over the years we grew closer and closer, but really it wasn't until the war where I made my final choice. Gabriel, you were always a thing of beauty, though when I saw how you moved, how you protected the others on the front line, while still able to come home and maintain your gentle, cheerful and sometimes aloof behavior, I started to admire you. You were able to stay strong. Despite the death of God, you became a rock of the seraphim to lean on while I vanished." Naruto grumbled, "I should have been there for everyone, but I was having trouble just getting my own head straight." Gabriel asked, not quite understanding what he was saying. "Naruto-kun." The individual in question gently rubbed the back of his neck. "I guess what I am saying is, you're precious to me, more so than Michael and the others. It is stronger like the feelings I felt for my mother, but at the same time different. What I do know is that I don't feel right when you aren't near me. During my exile I noticed that I felt stiffer, almost like something was holding me back. It feels wrong if you aren't by my side." Gabriel sighed, "But as fox folk you need to take multiple mates, which are like wives, isn't that right? That is the curse we have for the actions of our ancestor Aphrodite. Our lust is quite large and when it isn't filled we can't control our changes properly, though if our energy is depleted we will always return to a childlike state. Thankfully mine is somewhat balanced because I have two subspecies instead of the normal one, otherwise there is a chance that I would be trying to have this conversation with you right now as a fox. I honestly believe that would be both interesting and awkward though." He smiled slightly when he heard Gabriel laugh. But that all changed when she said, "We are taking this slow though, and I get the final say in your mates." Her eyes hardened. Naruto said softly, "I haven't seen you this serious since you heard that I had the Aura Linda, but yes you do." Gabriel, as she crawled into bed and leaned in to put her arms around him. "Yes, when I get serious I always get my way. Now about that book Naruto-kun," she said, her arms tightening around his neck and drawing their faces close together as her green eyes seemed to sparkle with hidden intent. "No, you are not ready to read it. It will break you. This is for your own good, Gabriel. When you are ready I will let you know, though for now you simply aren't." She could be as seductive as she wanted, but it wouldn't matter right now. She could try to force it out of him by making small threats or by acting serious. "Moo, but how come brother knew that you had it?" she said, abruptly abandoning any hope she had that she would be able to read it. With a contemplative expression on her face, Naruto asked, "He walked in when God handed it to me, so now you also know. What do you think it contains anyhow?" Gabriel: "I'm not sure, but if God gave it to you it must be important. He always gave you really important missions when he was alive, things that he couldn't trust to angels. Even the seraphim were not allowed to assist. I guess that is why I want to read that book so much, because it is this huge secret about what is inside of it. I like to think that it is magic. Michael thinks that it might be ways of forging, or super advanced technology." She responds truthfully prior to recognizing her position and blushing wildly. "How do you see me?" Gabriel was directly in front of her after she had been lying in his arms for a few minutes and had simply ignored it. "Everyone looks up to you. When you are here everything is deferred to you. I cannot understand how that must feel, to have a whole community depend on you. Even brother asks for your judgment on things when you're here." She was frozen as those words penetrated her, asking how she felt about the man in front of her yesterday. She could have responded without hesitation, but even now, she could still respond to him. She knew that they were drawn together for some reason, though she wasn't sure if it was because of who they were. She takes a breath to steady herself. "I often feel like I am out of place around you, despite knowing that I want to be near you. I find it hard to explain, that I am drawn to you, like you are a flame and I a moth. I am so happy that you have started to open up again. Everyone was worried when you returned and were colder than ice. Then something changed. You started to return back to how you were before the war. I want to stay by your side, help clean the world and make it a better place for everyone. I will hold you hand and face what comes at us. I will become your guardian angel." She wriggles her fingers into his hand. No one was ever able to catch my interest like you do. Nor do I believe that anyone would be able to. You seem to do what you want, but it always works out well for everyone around you. Even when you left us all behind, we had to become independent without any guidance from you and Michael. As Michael was busy trying to stabilize God's equipment, it was good for us to learn. I only wish that the cost hadn't been so high. He moves forward and gives her a quick peck on the cheek after noticing the dejected expression on her face. Tomorrow, come to 7th Heaven. I will let Michael know that you are coming to my forge. Naruto-kun. It was understandable that she was taken aback both during and after God's rule. Only Michael and Naruto were permitted entry into the 7th heaven, or the 7th level of heaven. If you will, furthermore, it will be the first time that anyone other than God or Michael has ever seen the source of their armor in any case. The mass-produced armor, which was almost identical in stature after several centuries of testing, was primarily used by the others. Gabriel's face lit up warmly when Naruto said, "If you want us to spend the rest of our lives together, you should see the work that I do. Not just the finished product, plus I need to get your sizes for the new suit of armor I am making. It is going to be my finest work yet." He seemed to disappear into his own little happy world whenever he talked about a new project or something he wanted to start marking. As they made their way through the 7th heaven, Gabriel trailed behind Michael when she inquired about it. Michael informed her that Naruto used it for his forging. Her eyes were darting everywhere, and she saw enormous golden pillars reaching up into the sky with an odd liquid flowing down them. Michael explained that a large house, which is now empty, was the residence of God before he passed away. By large house, she meant a large golden palace, which is undoubtedly the largest object in heaven, at least in her opinion. Up until now, the temperature had only slightly increased, but now Gabriel could feel the intense heat emanating from their destination. Is that?" she asked, as all that liquid was flowing here and spiraling down a big tube into what appeared to be a mountain. But the amount of smoke rising from the top made it look more like a volcano about to erupt. Michael smiled kindly. "Yes, sister. Now for the first time in so many years, someone other than myself and Naruto is going to enter the forge," is turning in excitement. "It is alive?" Michael pondered the question for a while. "I am honestly not sure. Naruto would know, also, unless he asks you to. Don't touch anything. The forge is a very dangerous place, Gabriel. I am not sure what you two talked about, but he asked me to bring you here." When they reached big, heavy metal doors, Gabriel remained silent. He took a leather glove out of one of his pockets and drew the door back, causing the air around them to thin as heat rushed out. "It is a little hot," Gabriel said as she followed Michael into the mountain, feeling perspiration immediately begin to form on her smooth skin. Only a few more minutes later, they heard the rattling of chains and the pounding of a hammer. They entered a large room that was roughly the size of some castle halls from the evil ages, and they saw Naruto standing there using a strange golden hammer to pound away on an anvil. As he adjusted the fire and the room's temperature, the chains hanging from his back pulled on the ones hanging from the ceiling. When Naruto looked over his shoulder and saw the two seraphs standing there, he smiled slightly and said, "I will be with you in a moment." The hammer sounds out a few more times before stopping entirely as Naruto lets the blade he was working on cool. One chain from his back hovers over towards them, seemingly studying them like a snake before moving back to its owner. He approached them with a broad smile, and Gabriel could see that his arms were tense at the moment. Since he left this morning, he had undoubtedly been working on that blade. "So, Gabriel, what do you think of my forge?" he asked. As she pondered, she noticed that the primary cause of the extreme heat was a shimmering golden liquid that was pouring into the space and down the walls, resembling lava. She was certain that it wasn't gold because, regardless of its value, Naruto wouldn't work with such a feeble substance. That led her to believe that it was something unique, something that only Michael and Naruto were aware of. Moving away from the liquid metal, she noticed stiff rock and hanging chains everywhere, but in all honesty, it appeared to be more of an underworld location than a place in heaven. Standing in the four corners, watching, were large golems that were probably made of the same liquid that was flowing through the room. She knew that if they were like Naruto's previous golems, they could easily protect him if he needed them. She could see numerous formulas hanging on the far wall, which indicated that he was probably using some sort of magic in his forging. However, when she considered what he had been able to create, it became evident that he had been doing so from the beginning. He was topless, which was kind of expected given the heat in the room, and he had a very fine line of sweat on his brow. Michael handed him a bottle of water, which Naruto took a few mouthfuls of before pouring it over his head and chest to cool himself down. Gabriel's eyes watched the water run down his body and into his pants line. Then she noticed his plans for the new armor and blushed before turning to face him. Gabriel, you're drooling." Naruto deadpanned, making the woman blink. Then, he lifted a hand to her mouth and discovered a tiny bit of drool there. After giving her a quick eep and wiping her face, she nodded and took another serious look around the room. It is different from what I expected. I didn't think to see something like this in heaven. She trailed a little, being careful not to look at the blonde's stunning body for too long. Naruto nodded slightly. I understand what you mean. God thought the same thing at first, but I quickly told him that if we didn't contain the forge like this, the heat would radiate all the way to the third heaven. That would make for somewhat uncomfortable experiences when I am doing heavy forging. Right now the temperature output is only at like 10 to 15% of its safe maximum. At that point I can only forge for 2 hours a day before I need to cool my body down, otherwise I can do permanent damage. At that level 7th heaven is off limits to everyone. Not even God used to stick around when I was working with those heats. It spreads to around 6th where you can feel a large heat increase, though it is only about as bad as a hot summer day on Earth. So that was you? Gabriel asked, recalling their childhood days spent with God, which always took place on extremely hot days and involved swimming. In retrospect, she realized that Naruto had never accompanied them. Yeah, that was when I was making the first prototype that would eventually become the standard Seraph armor. Once I finish Ural's sword I will get to work on the new Seraph armor. I plan on making it much lighter and easier to move in, the blonde says, rolling his hand slightly before clicking his fingers as the forge rapidly cools down. Come and take a seat, Gabriel. I need to take your measurements. Thank you for bringing her, Michael. Her armor is going to take the longest to get through. As he leaves, Michael nods in comprehension. Naruto did, after all, spend a lot of time on Gabriel's equipment. It had been his method of keeping her safe ever since he began using the forge. Naruto led her to a table with chairs surrounding it. A few pages of paper were scattered on it, but she could only make out equations about the infusion of light into leather at first glance. Colored obsidian. It is rather heat resistant, Naruto said, taking out a tape measure and beginning to measure her. He checked her fingers, thumbs, arm lengths, foot size, and leg length. To her surprise, Gabriel asked her to stand and measured her behind, waist, and chest, as well as her best. Before telling her she could sit again, he also measured her shoulders. Though it might seem a little strange to you, I do want this to be one of my finest pieces of work, thus I cannot leave out any detail, Naruto said. You didn't have to poke me so much, he said in response to her pout, which had started around the time he began measuring her. She was embarrassed by his attention to her body and wondered if it was the kind he liked. It was to see how much room would be needed between the armor and the insulated skin between it and your body. Having an armor that is too tight can cause quite a lot of bruising. One that is too loose hardly protects you at all. If anything, it is more of a hindrance than anything else. Always flopping around everywhere and restricting your movements by dropping into the wrong place. He turned his hand to the side as he wrote down a few things on paper. Do you want to be able to deploy your wings while inside of your armor, or would you rather it just allow you the ability to fly through a light converter? What is the difference, if you don't mind, Naruto-kun? After a few taps on the paper, Naruto turns and says, a light converter will take the action of your wings when you use them, only they won't come out, allowing them to be protected as well, though it will take away from the intimidation of seeing those stainless white wings of yours. His lips are pressed into a thin line. After all, Naruto never locked anything in one spot, so Gabriel asked, this converter, what would it make my light look like? Naruto said, it can either just expel a small trail of light behind you, or I can change it to give you wings like mine instead. But she gasped, oh yeah, you haven't seen my wings before, have you, Gabriel? He turned slowly and saw her shake her head quickly. Most of us had figured that you didn't have wings, Naruto-kun. Not really the case. I just make myself float around because my wings draw a lot of attention to me, Naruto said, standing out in a large open area of the forge and lightly shaking his head from side to side as he rolled his shoulders forward. The air in the room changed and two enormous wings formed out of an icy blue energy. I only have two, but they are huge, so I think that counts for something, right? He said. Gee, they're beautiful, was all Gabriel could say as she gazed blankly at the wings, which were unbelievably long. 4 times the size of Naruto's wings, and his height in width. They were so captivating that they nearly made you stare at them non-stop. As Gabriel's focus gradually returned to him, Naruto drew his wings back in and said, I can give you wings like that, though they will be smaller, only a little larger than 4 of your white wings at the moment. But they aren't all that easy to use. I need large open spaces, otherwise I can't use my full power. Using them in a hallway doesn't work out well. So most of the time I just hover around by forming tiny pockets of light at the bottom of my feet to keep me in the air. She nodded enthusiastically after her eyes widened, saying, I would like that very much. Then I have just about all I need then. You can stay if you want to. though I will be busy. Also before you ask, yes I can keep an area cool for you if you want, Naruto says. Concentrating on the paper on the table he taps it a few times before taking the ink off of it and throwing it at the far wall, where it splatters and becomes a large design that he can work from. As they began to leave the forge, a plethora of tiny, gold-looking machines emerged, standing at the height of children. As Gabriel crossed her legs elegantly and settled in, she watched the blonde man return to his work. Apparently, they would follow instructions written on the paper. A group of the tiny machines approached her and held out some paper for her. She raised an eyebrow before reading what was already written. She quickly made notes for a glass of water, a small snack, and something to read while grabbing a utensil from the desk beside her. In less than 5 minutes, those objects were in front of her with hammer blows that seemed to ring and bounce off the surrounding walls at a nice, even pace. She saw metal floating in the air around Naruto as she looked up from her book. His chains were carving and inscribing seals and runes into the metal before it made its way to his hammer and was shaped, and then the process was repeated repeatedly. Seeing the blonde working so hard while grinning broadly was truly something else. She was able to consider the future when she saw Naruto enjoying his work. She would later learn that he would only be there for 6 months. They spent too much time together, and she now glared at him in frustration as she stood in his room. I do not approve of you going to the underworld, the normally gentle woman said, crossing her arms beneath her chest as she watched him put on his new armor. This was really nothing special in comparison to his other set. I know, you've told me this quite often. He was wearing form-fitting black armor over his legs that ended at his waist, with a white bodysuit peeking out from underneath it. The only other areas of his bodysuit were his arms, which extended up to his mid-forearm, upper chest, and back. The material was more flexible, allowing him to fully rotate his arms. Naruto, I forb. This means I will come back. You're stuck with me now, though if you're really worried about me, I am taking number 1 and number 2 with me, plus Grayfia will be there. And you know she is no slouch, he said, interrupting her before she could finish. He adjusted his right glove before approaching her and slowly lifting her hand to reveal a bright golden ring. But what if she hates you now? You didn't know her very long after all, Gabriel said, dropping her glare and leaning into him. Gabby, I am a pretty good judge of character. Grayfia isn't like that. No one was kind to her before, as Lucifer wasn't exactly the most friendly person, though Lilith was able to keep him in line most of the time. Really though, I think he just found himself above everyone else, so she more than likely would have just been ignored by him, and that can be worse than any kind of abuse. I'm not going to let her think that she is alone anymore. Gabby, devil or not, I'm going to help her. You can't stop that, Gabby, Naruto said while wrapping his fingers around her tightly in his grasp. The strange material covering his skin was the same material that would be worn by all the Seraphim once he finished his new armor. Most of the sets were already finished, and she had been there to watch how he made them. The amount of time that went into each turn and plate of the armor made her appreciate his work even more. She gave him a small shake of her head before leaning into his body and feeling his warmth. I will never forgive you if you don't come back, she said, leaning up on her toes and briefly meeting his lips before giving him another glare. If I don't return, I won't forgive myself. I'll see you soon, Gabby. Make sure you keep your brother busy for me, okay? He said, smiling warmly as he broke away from her. His body began to crumble before it flew through the ground towards Earth, and he never heard her response when he reappeared outside his cabin. He was forced into a crouching landing, his fingers spreading across the floor. He was about to leap out of a big red magic circle when he looked down, but before he could finish preparing the inscription of what it was doing, he was thrown from his position once more. Not as much fire as I would have thought, was the first thing that came to mind when he opened his eyes and had to blink a few times. Naruto turned his head when a voice he remembered from earlier in the year said, people say that a lot, though I suppose heaven isn't made of clouds and golden pillars. A few people gasped as they saw his figure. An upside-down cross hung from his ear, and his hair was held up with a black headband, giving it a more spiky appearance than usual. Actually it is Searzek's. Naruto said with a smile on his face as he stood calmly and brushed off his hands and knees. The voice from somewhere nearby roared, you dare address the Mao in such a casual manner. Naruto slowly turned his head in their direction and shrugged. Gabby had helped him overcome his stiffness, but he would frequently revert to it in crucial situations, primarily because it was more comfortable for him. This man gave us the idea and theory behind the evil peace system that is being worked on. He has done more for Devildom than most that live here have with that one action, Searzek said, raising his hand to stop the roaring before it got any higher than it was due to others joining in. After cocking his neck to the side and sticking his tongue out at the inexperienced devil, Naruto turned to Searzek and looked curiously at the Mao, asking, how are you going with that, by the way? We should talk about that in private, though your new uniform is interesting, Sears said, glancing at the attire and feeling uneasy. Thank you. I made it myself. I would offer you one, but it might be a bit hard to make one for your, alignment. Naruto replied sheepishly. Not that important, though if you do find a way around that I would be interested, Grayfia, Sears said, waving his hand slightly. Naruto heard the soft tapping of shoes on the floor. Grayfia was standing there with her hair in a braid and her shoulder resting lightly. She was wearing what appeared to be English-made clothes, though he wasn't positive. She gave the blonde a little curtsy and said, "It is good to see you again, Naruto-sama. To be honest, a part of me thought that would have been our last meeting." Naruto gave a slight sigh. Let's get to a more private area. Forgive me if I don't want to spill my guts in front of people who would try to kill me if you weren't standing there, Sears. After squinting and glancing at those nearby, Grayfia stepped forward to stand beside Naruto and said, "I shall lead you to your quarters, Naruto-sama." Naruto nodded in response to her request and trailed Grayfia through the lengthy corridors that had a castle-like appearance. He was certain that the devils in this place had an odd fascination with England. The temperature naturally dropped sharply as icy crystals formed in the air around him and Grayfia, and he stopped counting the number of noble-like people who passed by and scowled at him or looked down on him. Fortunately, walking to their destination only took a quarter of an hour, but the 15 minutes were silent and extremely cold. He raised an eyebrow as he passed a sizable set of double doors with big golden crosses on them. He could sense the magic emanating from the doors, which served as a barrier against the devils. Grayfia said, "When Mal Beelzebub heard you were coming, he decided it was best if you were protected from devils entering your room. Only those that you or he allow will be able to enter. I overheard him saying he got the idea from your theory on light and its effects on materials." Grayfia was intrigued by his questioning of the door in front of him. Naruto moved forward and touched the cross, which glowed slightly before opening the door. "I had figured so. Must have been pretty dangerous for devils to work on something like this," he trailed. "I did sustain some minor burns while I was putting it together. Before you get cross, I chose to do so. I was not ordered, nor even asked, just like my position is made for the House of Grimori. Now is there anything I can do for you, Naruto-sama?" She looked him in the eyes with curiosity. "The best tea if you could. A pot and 2 glasses. I want to speak with you as I taste what the underworld has to offer, if that is okay," Naruto said, shifting into a contemplative pose before giving a slight shrug. Before bowing to the blonde, a ghostly smile appeared on her lips. "Then I shall return shortly, Naruto-sama," she said. Naruto then turned to face the bookshelf and ran his fingers along the spines. He paused after a short while and said, "You can enter now, Sears. Don't worry, I won't bite." His body was pulsating with gold. "You know, Grayfia was really nervous about whether or not you were going to come back for her, though I believe I did see her skipping down the hall just before. What did you say to her?" the redhead asked, laughing a little as he looked around the room. Everything was still in place, and he had to admit that he had no idea what the blonde would want his place to look like, even though he would like to think he did a good job. "Skipping repatriation?" asked Naruto. "Yes, skipping. I was quite shocked at first as well," Naruto calmly said. "I asked to have tea with her." Before taking out a book, opening it, and quickly skimming a few pages, a frown gradually spread across his face as he noticed that the name had been scratched off the front. "Whoever wrote this is an idiot," he said. "Well, yes, that would be the former Beelzebub. His views were quite Sears said with a slight frown. "There will always be tyrants. Those that have power will try to rule with force. Do not feel bad about that. Just do what you can to stop it." "But I wasn't talking about that. No, I was talking about his calculations and his minimal understanding of the universe around him. Know this, former Beelzebub is mentally retarded. Devils are not darkness incarnate. No, they are tainted light. How often people get that wrong grinds me in ways that you can't understand, stranger. No, I guess you would be the current Beelzebub, seeing as you have been readily accepted by the room," Naruto murmured, causing Sears to gasp as a slow round of applause rung from the wall where a green-haired the man left. He was wearing brown dress pants and a longish jacket that was a few shades duller than his hair, and he had his hair slicked back. His eyes were light blue, and he said, "And I take it you are the infamous Naruto?" "That would be correct. Ajuka, when did you get here?" "I came in moments after you, Sears, through the transportation circle that leads to my lab. I want to work with Naruto-san further in the future, though I do agree that devils are not darkness incarnate. After looking at your work, I was surprised to find that had it not been pointed out and shown how to look for it, I may have continued with my ways of thinking for another few decades." Ajuka sighed slightly after his first name was revealed, ran a hand through his hair, and then cast a bored glance at the room. Sears asked, Wait, so we aren't beings of darkness, Ajuka? And the green-haired man shook his head no. No, as Naruto-san pointed out to me, and after I checked for myself, I came to the conclusion that we are in fact tainted light. Our darkness is purely from the corrupted light of Lucifer, the father of all devils. In other words, we are perfected fallen angels. Ajuka reasoned. This caused Searsex to wide disbelief. Are you sure? Ajuka smiles broadly. Yes, I tested the theory on my own body. I could see the light starting to clean itself when I injected a tiny amount into my own body, or as it was formerly known as, light poisoning. Before putting his book back on the shelf, Naruto said, no, I still call it that. It is just easier to stick to that name that you devils have been using for so long. You are the one that is handling my notes with Grayfia's supervision, I assume. He asked. That's right, though I have noticed how advanced some of your formulas are. I wonder what is your job in heaven. With a few taps on his arm, Naruto said, I am the smithy of heaven. I make the equipment for the seraphim, and of course a few toys for myself. Are you that Naruto, the holy smith? Asked Ajuka, raising an eyebrow. I wonder how you know that title. As long as he thought of it as the man and not the title, Ajuka said, oh, we captured some fallen. They made it very clear that heaven would always make it out alive, as long as you continued to live. Those that once stood beside you now fear you. Whispers that you can make life with a forge not even God could touch, he said, smiling slightly. He takes a deep breath and crosses his arms across his chest. Not even I can make life. Then again, I haven't really tried. The closest thing to what they are speaking would be my golems, or maybe the sacred gear, but that isn't life, merely an existence that is reliant on the orders of others. It would be the same as saying that a wheel is alive because it can move without someone touching it. I figured, if you could truly create life, then there would no longer be a need for humans, would there? Ajuka said with a little snort of laughter. Oh, so you found that out, did you? My, finding a devil that studies the laws of the universe, the brunette replied with a broad grin. How thrilling to meet someone that may be able to understand my line of thought. I come to much the same conclusion, though I truly do wonder if the gap between dimensions is as large as it appears, or if it is simply an illusion cast by the nothingness between each exit. Hardly. I do believe that it is as large as it appears. After all, the universe needs room to grow, does it not? If that is the case, then won't we one day run into the other exit? When Grayfia returned with tea, Searsex was just standing there dumbly. She had brought a lot of cups, as if she thought something like this would happen. Lucifer-sama, would you care for some tea? She asked, observing that the current Lucifer appeared to be a bewildered child while Naruto and Ajuka appeared to be discussing the laws of the universe. Upon seeing her, Searsex nodded without noticing her entrance and said, that would be lovely, Grayfia. I am feeling quite stupid right now for not understanding what they are talking about. She poured a glass for the Mao, set it on the table in front of him, and bowed her head lightly. I would not. Apparently Naruto-sama has no one in heaven he can speak to on equal terms since God died. Gabriel often said that he would spend hours talking to himself as he worked to help ease his sense of self, she said. So basically, he has to dumb himself down so that others around him can understand. Replied, that is what Gabriel said, and after looking at the designs that he was playing around with, and the theory behind the devil reincarnation, I can see that his mind works on a different level than ours. In a sense, he and Beelzebub seem almost like kindred spirits. To draw more attention to the pair, Naruto roared, why in the name of all that is holy would you think that a series matrix is a good idea for casting? It is stronger and faster than using parallel, able to increase cast speed by 34.5%, Ajuka replied. Yes, and while that is happening, allow me to shift a single section of your magic circle a degree and watch it blow up in your face. Yes, a series casting is best when you are stationary, but for proper combat, parallel is best. It is safer and more reliable. TCH, no wonder none of your spells could break through my barriers in the Great War. That was you. I tried rewriting, even code change, and nothing. Not a single one of my spells could even come close to scratching that barrier around God, he gently said. Those dragons really saved our ass. If not, then you and God may have slowly just taken us all out before we ever broke through to you. Probably not. Naruto shrugged his shoulders, adding, the fallen were pushing back the seraphim. I would have left to help them if it came to them being in real danger. So you were that blonde during the Great War that stopped the devils in their tracks? Searsex asked, finding that he could keep up with this, but I thought you said that the war had nothing to do with you. He asked, observing Naruto's slight nod. I said any more. Once God fell, I learned some interesting things. It is partly the reason why I am here along with visiting Grayfia, of course. I came here to offer a ceasefire between heaven and devils, Naruto said as he approached the table and put one of the offered glasses to his lips. After tasting it and giving Grayfia a brief compliment, he stiffened a little before breathing normally again. Ajuka narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "There are a few things I would like your eyes to look over for me. If you help me make progress, then you will have my vote." Sears X appeared to be stuck on the idea. With a weary sigh, the red-headed Mao turned to face Ajuka and said, "I will bring it up with the others, but I can't just put my vote behind you yet. I need to see a little more from you before I make up my mind." The following statement, however, took everyone by surprise. "That is fine, I have no intention of leaving before we have come to an agreement. After all, a couple hundred years is really nothing to creatures like us." Naruto-sama, sorry Grayfia, I didn't think it would be this tight. If it is for you I don't mind Naruto-sama. It will start to feel better soon, I promise. Please be gentle, I am still tired from last time. Then why did you say yes? Because you asked for me Naruto-sama. Looking around the room, Ajuka rubbed his temple and said, "Really, if I couldn't see what you two were doing I might take this the wrong way." The majority of the scientists were either blushing profusely or had already passed out. "What are you talking about? The base suit is a little tight on the first wear, once it is on it will adjust to her body." Naruto asked, looking down at Grayfia, who was wearing a tight black leather suit, as he peered up over her shoulder with a leather cord in his mouth and a bewildered eyebrow. "Oh you dirty devils, and there we go," he said as he was putting her on. He pulled the cord in his mouth one last time, and a black mist rolled out of Grayfia, loosening the suit a bit and creating a fox emblem on her left breast. Then, cloth emerged from her waist, adding more covering for her more private areas, specifically her frontal garden and her back. Grayfia said, "I feel strange but good," as she slowly raised her hand and clenched her fist, aiming at the testing dummy in front of her. A tiny magic circle appeared in her palm, and then a giant spear made of ice formed almost instantly. Small patches of gold appeared, specifically around the trimming and around her collar. It was by no means loose, but now it almost felt like she was naked, as if it clung to her so tightly that it had become her skin. "What did my lab ever do to you?" Ajuka moaned as he looked out from his position in the laboratory and saw that the entire wall the dummy was in front of was gone, along with everything surrounding it. He also watched as the ice crystals that littered the air gradually disappeared. With a tongue out, Naruto replied, "Parallel magic rules Ajuka. There is no way that was a parallel sequence, it was much too destructive." "No, Naruto-sama is right." After he explained the difference between how I was using magic and his use of parallel over my series 1 converted my spells to the former. Though my ice spear was beyond what I expected, I am glad I didn't try anything more destructive. Was this a good test, Naruto-sama?" she asked cautiously, only to receive a thumbs up from the brunette. "It was great. The reason why it was more powerful than normal is because of the suit's features. It takes in the natural energies of the world around it to make the wearer's basic stats much higher. At the moment I would put you at a lower level seraph in combat form with your stats Grayfia. In other words, it's a boost of nearly 50%, which is nothing to scoff at, mind you," Naruto said with a beaming grin. "Last time was only a 25% increase," said Grayfia, her eyes widening a little. "Yeah, it is still taking some getting used to, and really the only one I can make armor for at the moment is Grayfia. Seriously, you devils are so difficult. Each one of your families has this unique build that needs to be attended to," Naruto said after giving Ajuka a slight nod. When he was finished, a loud ding sounded, raising some of the others' eyebrows in question. "Sounds like our other project has finished testing." Ajuka's eyes widened slightly. Naruto's explanation of the concept behind the combat armor was so fascinating that he had forgotten what they were actually working on. "Is this really going to revive people? It feels so lackluster," he asked, rolling a single chess piece around in his hand several times before moving over to the spinning turbines as they slowed down and letting out a little sigh. A lovely blonde brow rose. "Heavens no, that is a control piece, the king from that human game chess. The king is the leader, the game if you will. The lives of the others are linked to the king. They gain power from the king, fame, fortune. The king is both their leader and the one that depends on them most." "So this is basically just a title, right?" asked Ajuka, nodding as Grayfia gave him a blank stare. As he approached the dispenser, Naruto gently picked up the queen piece by its top and dangled it. "Now you shouldn't even need to touch this to feel the aura coming off of it. Correct, that piece is merely to connect all the others. Once another piece is done being like right now, we can look over the difference," he said. "And this is following that formula of yours?" Ajuka asked, her eyes wide as she took in the composition. "Not exactly. Like I mentioned earlier, while all devils came from the same father, if you will, each of you is vastly different in makeup. That control piece is a blank, an example really. It belongs to no one and cannot belong to anyone, though each piece it controls has a very real power boost. You can't replicate these pieces. I made sure of that, as these I feel should be for devils that have no real family left, ones that will not serve any one person, but the devil side of the underworld as a whole, like guardians if you will. Naruto plays with the piece in his hand, as the other pieces finish their process the way he did. Ajuka asked, "So you mean to say that you have been wasting time?" His reply was a shook face followed by mock pain. "Oh dear no, I was never asked to make the evil piece system for you. No, I was asked to show you how it works. I even built most of the machines to create it. Now you want me to make the pieces as well? How rude. I thought you were a scientist. With what I have shown you, shouldn't you be able to make something even more efficient?" "There is no doubt about it being more efficient, though would that really be better?" Ajuka said with a slight smile. "Ah, you've noticed. Of course, after all, I am not so simple as to have missed something like that, though I will admit it is quite well hidden and I wouldn't pick it up with just a passing glance, nor without your explanation just then. That piece has no limit. It is set to evolve with whomever it is placed inside, which means you plan to have it placed into somebody who is already a devil," Ajuka says, glancing at Grayfia, aware that the woman is paying close attention, but briefly misses Naruto's gaze on her. "Well, I am part fox after all." Naruto grinned slyly before throwing the queen up in the air and applying some magic to allow it to reach Ajuka. "Though like you said, these pieces are incredibly advanced, almost sentient if you will, for you cannot choose who will be accepted by them. Only the piece of myself can change that, but now it is much too late. Every piece but that queen will find someone to bind with. Though, just because someone has one of these pieces inside of them, does not mean that they cannot become a king. Just a little hint for you, Ajuka, though if you will excuse me, I think I want to have a little tea party. Would you like for me to organize a list of guests and bring tea for you, Naruto-sama?" Grayfia asked, strode up to stand in front of Naruto's face after noticing that he would soon be moving. "No, I don't think you will need to send out invites, Grayfia. I think we will just have tea with Searsex and his family," said Naruto, spinning on his feet and making his way to the exit with Grayfia at his heels. "I understand, Naruto-sama. I will make sure to prepare the finest available." To think that someone from heaven would be able to make such a heavy darkness. Truly you are something else. You are not any angel I have ever seen. Not even Michael could make me feel this sense of unease, but I agree, if you were able to create a plan for something like this in a month, then you really are too dangerous to remain a foe, Ajuka exclaimed, shaking his head gently from side to side as he watched the blonde raise an arm and point a thumb up into the air. Naruto glanced at the group of people seated around the table. It was not just Lord and Lady Grimori, Searsex's parents, who had been added. Rather, he had a strange but vivacious woman sitting across from him. He had spent a few minutes trying to get Grayfia to take the vacant seat next to him, although she was quite strict about the fact that it would be extremely inappropriate for her to sit as their equal since she was now Grimori's maid. She had changed out of her combat suit and was wearing a long maid outfit that hung down to her ankles. Searsex trailed. Less than a week, he had genuinely anticipated that the first evil pieces would be made much more slowly, but it was already the afternoon of the last day of the week, and Ajuka had already told Searsex about the outcome. She was amazed that the blonde had made the pieces and the equipment in less than 7 full days. "You are able to get quite large results, aren't you, Naruto-san?" she asked. "Once the research is done, forming the object is beyond simple. If a child was able to understand my notes, they would be able to build the dubbed evil pieces. Ajuka now has both the means and the method behind their creation. I look forward to seeing that work evolve with his own touches," Naruto replied with a calm sips of the tea that was provided. Uncertain whether he had actually heard the other Mao correctly, Searsex asked, "He also mentioned something about a combat suit." He assumed he was right, though, based on Grayfia's slight stiffening, she had strongly recommended herself to lead the visitor around, taking her role seriously and never leaving his side. "That is correct. At the moment, if Grayfia was to wear her custom suit, she would be the second, maybe third strongest among the devils in the room. I do apologize for that, Lord and Lady Grimori," Naruto said with a slight smile as he carefully set down the glass without making any noise. Hugo, also known as Lord Grimori, was the one who responded. "I was under the impression that you are the main reason for Grayfia being part of this house in the first place, and after you promised not to fight while you stayed here, making your guide more powerful could be considered an act of self-defense. You have managed to protect yourself, along with further improving the strength of my house. Quite the solid move. Then again, you always were an unmovable pillar. Not a single attack ever breached that strange barrier of yours during the war." Naruto smiled kindly at the group, garnering some laughter. People have said that when it comes to creating something that there is no one better than me, Naruto said. They all stopped when the next person said, what about God? Isn't he meant to be the one that created the world and all that live on it or something? It was the vivacious girl, Seraphal, who, if Naruto was right, was now one of Devildum's 4 leaders. Searsex whispered in her ear, Seraphal, I know you weren't exactly there during the Great War but God died, but everyone could hear them thanks to their improved hearing. She slapped her head against the table in a quick bow after a moment of embarrassment. Ah, sorry, I didn't know. His head was lightly shaking. No, the blame rests sorely with myself, Seraphal-san. If I had not have moved to fight the dragons, he may still be here today, though I would kindly ask that you do not spread this information around. Only the Seraphim and myself know in heaven, Searsex and Azazel know, and now those in this room as well. Grayfia I had already spoken to about this when I was helping her to recover, but mostly it is hidden from the world. I understand, you can call me Levi-tan though, Seraphal-san makes me feel old. Naruto said, I understand, you want to retain your youth despite your age, an honorable goal, Levi-tan, nodding sternly and wearing a wise expression. Seraphal stood up in shock, slamming her hands down on the table and glaring at the blonde. Why you think you're all that just because you have a handsome face and smarts? She huffed a few times and blushed when she realized what she had said, saying, I didn't mean it like that. This caused some of the people in the room to snicker. Leviathan-sama, you are forgetting the most important part of Naruto-sama's appeal, and that would have to be his body. It is incredibly toned and feels quite nice when he holds you, Grayfia said with a stoic expression. This gave her the opportunity to observe Mao, who was already flushed, sink into her chair and mutter something about evil maids trying to harm her. Searsex, however, laughed lightly and said, really Seraphal, you are the youngest here, there is nothing for you to be scared of, if anything you are the child of the group. She clicks on what was said and asks, Searsex, you don't understand the troubles of a maiden's heart. Wait, Naruto is older than me. Searsex smiles nervously. If he was telling the truth about the time that has passed since his mother left the world, then yes, the next oldest is my father, turning 2000 years old next year. He is the oldest in the room. As he looks down at his tea bitterly, Naruto retorts, ew, now I feel like an old man. Thanks for that, Searsex, you whippersnappers these days, not showing respect to your elders. He raises his fist and shakes it at Searsex, making the man gape at the spectacle. Though in all respects, there isn't a devil alive that is older than me. The original Lucifer was my quiet little junior. I am sorry, Searsex smiled uneasily once more. Don't apologize, it was the fault of heaven that he turned out that way, you all just did what you had to. Hugo grinned slightly. That does explain why he told us all to only use enough energy to make it look like we were trying to break through your barrier. Lucifer knew that we wouldn't, he was just buying time for it to drop. Yes, there are only 3 things in the world that can force the barrier I was using back then to break, and none of them were present on the field of battle that day. I have no doubt that if the dragons didn't start to rampage through the battlefield, Lucifer would have started to attack the Seraphim in order to draw my attention away from God to them. A sad expression appeared on Naruto's face. He was ruthless when it came to battle, but he knew how to make use of the smallest of weaknesses. Couldn't do paperwork to save his life though. This made people around him laugh a little because they tried to imagine the powerful Lucifer working behind a desk, completing paperwork. Please forgive me, but I think I should retire for the night, Naruto said, raising a hand to wipe away the tear that had fallen from his eye. We will send someone to wake you in the morning for breakfast. Searsex said, grinning kindly on the outside but frowning inside. That would be nice, thank you all for allowing me a piece of your time, Naruto said, nodding slightly as he stood up and left in a quiet manner. Go after him, Grayfia, he said, but it wasn't really an order. Rather, it was Sirich's way of letting her do what she had planned. He watched her go, too, and then let himself relax in his chair while Sarah gave him a calming pat on his arm. I hadn't thought of it before, but those from heaven had it the hardest in the war, he said, drawing puzzled looks from the other people in the room. With a slight sigh he glanced across the space. The original Lucifer was an angel, and like Naruto said, he grew up with them. Then there is the fallen angels. At a time each of them rested in heaven with the angels. They were fighting former friends on all sides. That is terrible. I cannot imagine how they must have felt, how they still feel. Fallen angels actively hunt angels, trying to either make them fall, or kill them if they can't, to be hunted and killed by those you grew up with. I can't imagine a worse way of living. His thoughts turned to the blonde once more. If he was telling the truth, according to Searsex, Lucifer was one of the first angels, so the blonde was not only older than any living devil, but he also knew every single fallen. But that really got him thinking about what the blonde was. Shouldn't he be exhibiting symptoms if he was that old? "I'm going after them," said Seraphol, getting to her feet and huffing a little before Searsex could realize what had happened and attempt to stop it. She had already left, with the doors closing behind her. Seraphol let out a sigh and glanced down the hallway, where the two had already separated. She would swiftly catch up to them by jogging down. Even though he hadn't noticed her yet, Naruto stopped moving, causing Grayfia to give him a worried look before his form transformed back into one that was even smaller than the one that looked after her. His clothes had shrunk to fit him, and he appeared to be around 4 or 5 years old. He had an angry expression on his face and said, "Looks like I need to recharge again." Grayfia smiled at him. "As you said, your energy comes back slower here than it does in heaven. You should make sure to take this into account when you plan on working yourself as hard as you do, Naruto-sama." He froze as two arms draped over his shoulders. "I guess you're right. I just wanted to get the worst of the work out of the way. Now I can enjoy myself more." He said. "I wanted Grayfia. He is just too cute." "You are incredibly close, Levi Tan," Naruto said, slowly turning his head to meet Seraphal's bright eyes. "You actually look like a mini Naruto. Where did he go anyway? I wanted to speak with him." "Do you know Grayfia?" Seraphol asked naively, taking in his appearance and the people he was with. "Why, you would currently be holding Naruto-sama, Leviathan-sama." "Naruto-san?" Seraphol asked, her eyes widening as her hold on the blonde began to tighten. His eyes were bulging out of his head as Seraphal's hold seemed to tighten like proportions. "Yes, that is me. You wanted me to call you Levi Tan so that you didn't feel old, arhk. Grayfia, she chalking me," he said. "Leviathan-sama, I would kindly ask that you release Naruto-sa." "Nope. I'm keeping him. His hair is so fluffy it tickles, plus I can cuddle with him and hold him and feed him and love him and pet him and never ever let him go." Where did he go?" Her bewildered expression was caused by the log with hair on its tops that was now in her arms. "I do not know, Leviathan-sama. Perhaps you should look for him?" Grayfia said, stiffening as hands tightened around her leg and warm breath tickled her inner thigh. Do you think I scared him, Grayfia?" she asked with a dejected expression that genuinely conveyed regret. However, Grayfia's expression was completely different, and her eyes nearly rolled into the back of her head. This is because, as you can see, she had lost her underwear when she was changing out of the custom combat suit Naruto had made for her and into her maid uniform. At this point, Naruto was clinging tightly to her leg, trying to burrow his head into her lap while breathing frantically and allowing his naturally spiked but incredibly soft hair to tickle her beyond what she could consider aroused. "I am not sure," she exclaimed as one of his spikes sank into her moist slit, causing her to collapse on top of him. His face ended up beneath her, and her cheeks turned the same color as the Grammari's hair. Her walls tightened under the new sensation as she felt his tongue slide between her folds and tease her entrance. Grayfia?" Seraphol asked the blushing maid, who appeared to be destroying the persona she had worked so hard to acquire. "Are you okay?" "Kya," she exclaimed as she felt the object beneath her growing size and watched Naruto's legs emerge from beneath her uniform. Her face flushed even more from the experience, and she stood up, patting herself down and blinking a few times before clearing her throat and saying, "If you will excuse me, I need to go have a cold, very cold shower. And apart from being bathed in light, that is the other way to get my energy back, damn lustful ancestor." "Oh, hello, Levi Tan. You're still there?" Naruto said, lifting his arm and running it over his face to wipe away the fluids. She said, her eyes trailing down to his chest, barely contained behind the tight white fabric that showed off those muscles discussed earlier. She wondered exactly how those eyes would feel against her nip. "I have got go." Seraphal's retreating form could be seen running down the hall in a humorous cloud of dust. She was frozen by those eyes of his. The icy blue with a cross through the middle. There was something about them that made them feel so powerful, but not a shred of that power coming from his body. It hardly seemed fertile, though, given what they have been through recently, also along the lines of the fact that the underworld was never meant to sustain life for long periods of time. It is not surprising, though at this rate the devils won't be able to stay here for much longer. In a couple hundred of years the ground will no longer be able to support any plant life, which will destroy their livestock industries. Although you already knew this, didn't you, Seraphol?" Naruto said as he sat up and looked around the empty halls. As they positioned themselves beside Naruto on the archway, the vivacious girl scowled and said, "Moo, I thought I could spy on you if I pretended to run away. How did you know all that though? I heard you were smart, but that is just crazy. I made a garden once. It was said to be the most beautiful and perfect place in the known universe. I watched as it fell apart from improper care. Plus my eyes are a little special, he said with the cross-like eyes of hers. Sirzex is dealing with politics while Ajuka is working on technological advancements. I haven't met the other Mao yet, but I can't figure out what you do, Serafal. The vivacious girl continued, only pausing when Naruto put a hand on her head and ruffled her hair, making her pout. I am in charge of foreign affairs. Normally I would be the one that would be taking care of you, but because of Grayfia-chan, Sirzex-kun is looking after you, plus you have been spending quite a lot of time with Ajuka-kun. Falby-kun is in charge of military affairs, but he is pretty lazy, so you might not meet him for long. Fair enough, but you are getting distracted, say. Levi-tan. How about Sarah-chan? Naruto asked, pausing before shrugging. Acceptable, now continue. Understood, Sarah-chan-sama. He didn't miss the irritated expression that crossed her gaze. Like you said, I am a foreign affair, so how about we work on fixing the ground around the underworld? After all, I still need to get more votes from the Mao to let this ceasefire pass through, and doing things for the betterment of the underworld seems to follow the path so far. I was really worried, you know. Serafal apologized. When Sirzex-kun said that someone from heaven was coming, I thought that it was going to be a violent event, but you are much nicer than I could have imagined. You even have a few of the servant girls chasing after you. Though I heard Grayfia-chan beats them off with a stick, she seems to have really fallen for you. Naruto looked at her voice with a sad expression. I just treated her right, do unto others, as you would have them do unto you. I think this is one of the most important lessons my father taught me, though in the end he couldn't follow his own teachings. My brother though took it to the extreme. In the end it led to both of their deaths, so while I might come across as calm and nice to those around me, I am not above getting angry and lashing out for what is right, or in defense of myself or those I care about. Mu, will you help me save the underworld, Naru-kun? It would be my honor, Sarah-chan, he said, his lips twitching into a smile as he took her hand, knelt down, and gave her fingers a quick kiss. Serafal was wearing a long tan dress that would help conceal any dirt she got on herself. Her hair was pulled back into twin ponytails, and she was staring at the person who was helping her with a hint of confusion on her face. Naruto was standing there topless and without shoes, only wearing white pants. Aren't you going to get dressed? She asked, struggling to focus on anything but his sculpted form, which gave the tiniest ripples when he moved, demonstrating how tight his muscles were. I didn't exactly bring a spare change of clothing. I have my combat suit and these pants which are made from my body's natural energies. He patted his head on the back before laughing nervously. I should probably get that fixed, though you're the only one that has brought this up. So, did you bring what I asked for, Sarah-chan? I did, but I can't understand why we need a map of the underworld, said the vivacious Mao, reaching into her pockets before pulling out a large roll of parchment. Serafal trailed, stiffening as Naruto gently tilted her hands forward so he could view the map. Naruto stepped back and held out his hands, displaying a small sapling. This tree is special. The better you look after it, the stronger it becomes and the longer it lives for, he said. I need the general layout so we can find the best places to plant the special trees that will heal the ground, otherwise the effects will take much longer. Doing it like this, it should only take a couple weeks for changes to start to show. With a frown on her face, Serafal says, really? I didn't know that there were any trees like that around. If there were, then this would have been really helpful. Closing his hands, Naruto said, no, there really aren't anything like these anymore. Well, that isn't true. There is still one, but it is in heaven. I hear that the seraphim spend a lot of time with it, protecting it from anyone else. They were used to stabilize Eden's gardens and to spread the fertile soil out further by having the trees spread the good feelings and nutrients that they produced because of said feelings. He then shook his head and looked up at the hazy sky. What are they called? Serafal asked, staring at him with wide eyes. Surely something like this had to have a name, one she could give her thanks to when the soil began to become enriched again. Doesn't really have one. We just refer to them as life-giving trees. They have appeared with many names across different factions. Yggdrasil is the one that comes most strongly to mind, though I will need a bit of your magical power to allow for the changes to take shape and so that the tree doesn't act out against you all. So I guess we are going to be making a new tree together, Sarah-chan. I will let you name it. Naruto smiled broadly. From what I saw, it would be best if we start with the Gremory household before moving in a clockwise rotation of the underworld and finishing at the Seatree household, allowing you to go to sleep afterwards, because it is going to be a tiring day. Even though they had been teleporting all day, by the time they arrived at the Seatree household, it was late at night. Some of the households had initially panicked when they were informed of the situation, but they were relieved when a solution was already in front of them. They assured Serafal that they would take care of the trees every few days as directed and allow the two to plant them in an open area of the grounds. Where is the best place for the sapling, Sarah-chan? Serafal asked. wiping a tiny drop of perspiration from her forehead and glancing at the topless blonde who continued to work without showing any signs of weariness. He was practically like a machine that a juka would create. The Mao in question assumed a cute contemplative pose and tapped her chin several times before it appeared that she had discovered the solution. "Come with me, Naru-kun. I have the perfect place," she said, taking his hand and guiding him through the hallways at a leisurely pace while ignoring the murmurs of her household servants. "Sarah-chan?" he asked as they emerged from the halls into a vast garden with a massive glass dome that served as a ceiling, or at least that's what it was attempting to be. Naruto could see stones lining the outside, which were supposed to hold lovely plants, while dried-up grass appeared to cover most of it. "I have always been really bad at gardening. For the longest of times I thought it was just me, but I want to give it another try if you don't mind, Naru-kun." The thoughtful expression on his face caused Seraphol to get nervous and raise her arms in defense. "I have been paying lots of attention when you were telling everyone how to look after them, and I promise I will do my best. It is just I want to be able to create something for a change. Everywhere I go I seem to cause harm. I just want to show that I can do good too, you know? There was nothing you could have done here, Sarah-chan. This ground has been dead for centuries," Naruto said. Bending down and touching the ground with a frown on his face, he caught a glimpse of her dejected expression as he said, "If we are going to do this, I am going to need your help again, but I am going to have to plant my own special tree for you, not the one that we have been planting today." Seraphol shook her head free and nodded firmly to Naruto, saying, "I promise I will do my best, Naru-kun." The water was still uncontaminated due to poor maintenance and soil breaking away and getting into the water. It was a nightmare to try to keep clean. The blonde got up and walked a few paces forward to what appeared to be a small island surrounded by a murky body of water. It wasn't her fault, though, because if what he had learned from Sirzex and Ajuka was accurate, this land was dead long before Seraphol was born. When she attempted to create a garden, she was setting herself up for failure. After digging a good hole, Naruto opened his hands and created another sapling, which felt a little different. Even though Seraphol thought it still looked like a brown twig, she moved forward, gently wrapping her hands around the plant, directing a small amount of her aura into it to prevent it from becoming hostile. She could confidently state that she didn't want a creeping tree that would tear her home apart gradually. After witnessing what a hostile plant could do earlier in the day when she didn't employ this strategy, Seraphol used her magic to create a tiny drizzle of water over the sapling. After Naruto gently placed the tree in the ground and covered it with dirt, she grinned broadly and said, "Thank you, Naru-kun," as the dry yellow grass surrounding the base gradually turned green. Even though she didn't receive the answer she was hoping for, he turned to face her and smiled thinly before asking, "Could you please get me something to drink, Sarah-chan?" Her brow arched in perplexity before she nodded and skipped out of the room to get them some tea. After she was gone, he put his hands on the ground and spread his big blue wings, his hands glowing a bright white as the sapling in front of him began to grow quickly. The grass surrounding it quickly turned a lush green as the pink leaves began to fall, gently floating to the dried-up plants that littered the outskirts in the water, purifying and healing everything they touched, reviving the dead garden. Naruto opened his eyes slowly and looked at his hands. Seeing that he had returned to his childlike state, he smiled warmly before folding his wings into his back and falling forward to the sound of running water. When Seraphol returned a while later, a crash sounded from the entrance, prompting some of the servants to rush to her aid. The lord and lady of the house also hurried to her aid after discovering their daughter on her knees, staring into the room with small gasps. "Seraphol, what happened in here?" they asked. She couldn't explain the feeling she got from the big white tree in the center. She turned to face the base and saw the blonde figure lying face down on the ground. Without responding to her parents, she rushed forward, startling them as she rushed to the child, lifted him up, and felt that his pulse was still stronger. He was simply sleeping. "Seraphol?" her father asked, startling her out of her reverie as she leaned back in relief and felt the tree, a strange sensation coursing through her body, at peace with everything. She looked up at the tree and noticed a tiny leaf on the tip of her nose. "I spent the day healing the land with the representative from heaven. This is the final tree we planted. Don't worry, it is safe. Mickey wouldn't hurt us, would you?" she said. "Mickey?" asked her mother. "Hi. This is the Mickey tree." She leaned against the tree and rolled the blonde child over, placing his head in her lap. "Father, mother, come feel the tree. Mickey is really calming, like warm milk before bed," she said. Her mother was the first to say, "This young child is heaven's representative?" as her parents stepped forward and put their hands against the tree with skepticism before widening their eyes and almost melting into the emotion the tree exuded. "Usually he is in an adult form, but when he runs out of energy, he turns into a child, or at least that's what Grayfia-chan said," she said, gently caressing his head before slowly bending down and kissing him on the lips. "She said he gains his strength from the love of others," she said, with a slight frown on her face. After everything he has done for us today, I can't help but feel that way, though I doubt he sees me the same. Even so, if the other trees work as well as this one, he will have my vote on the ceasefire between the devils and angels. Wah! I dropped the tea I made for us. Her parents' eyes widened in shock, not knowing why there was a representative from heaven, only that there was one. Moreover, it appeared that their daughter had feelings for the blonde man, perhaps a fleeting crush, but it was the first time she had shown him this much affection. She strode his hair in silence before stiffening. Please prepare our finest tea for us and young, Lady Citri said, snapping her fingers to summon a few maids. Serafal responded, Naruto, also he is old not young, after realizing her mother was unaware of Naruto's name. While the lord and lady of the house followed their daughter's lead, with her mother leaning against the tree and her father in her lap, the maids responded, at once milady, then bowed low and filtered out of the room. Before long, she could hear her father's little snores. You this? Naruto spent the day planting tree like this one throughout the underworld? Lady Citri asked quietly as the soothing aura of the tree helped her release any tension she may have been feeling. With a slight shake of her head, Serafal said, this one is special, but we spent the day planting healing trees through the underworld to make the soil fertile again. Naru-kun said it would take about a week for results to start to show, though with this tree I saw the ground changing right away. She looked around at all the plants she had attempted to grow over the years, which appeared to be in full bloom and brighter than before. He said that the trees we used to help the underworld were the same used to stabilize Eden, but this one brought the dead plants and grass back to life. I think I understand Ajuka-kun's fascination with Naru-kun now. Her mother asked quietly, and why is that, my dear? He found a way to turn humans into devils so that we can replenish our numbers. He can plant trees that can heal the earth, plus this special one that brought dead plants back to life. Naru-kun almost seems like a god when you start going through what he has done for us so far, and all he is asking in return is for us to stop attacking angels, while they will do the same to us. He is really asking for nothing in return, Serafal said as she glanced at the blonde sitting on her lap. He had previously told her that he was cold when necessary, but he still appeared almost too pure. Really, if only devils like him were more common. Naruto's eyes slowly opened, and he quickly realized that he had been asleep for a while due to body aches from standing in one position for so long. The second was that, due to the noise being made, people were singing and dancing outside while it was raining. The third was that he was in bed. He could tell this by looking at the design on the roof above him and by the weight that was resting half on the bed and half on Hima, a sight that would bring down even the most holy of angels as her nude body pressed close to his. Her silver hair was disheveled, as if she was hesitant to release her grip. He thought he had been asleep for a very long time because he could see a slight pink swelling around her eyes, which would suggest she had been crying. He heard the sounds of dishes being prepared as he moved down the hallways, and a few of the maids stopped and began whispering to each other before blushing. A breath left his lungs as he slowly released her grip, and with a single thought, his pants reappeared as he opened the door. He opened the doors outside, quickening his pace a little, having been following the flow of energy. Sirzex was grinning at the scene before him, with Serafal and Sarah appearing to be dancing beneath the splashing water alongside Lady Citri and Gremory. Their husbands were also standing next to Sirzex, grinning broadly. It has been centuries since it last rained, said Lord Gremory. Lord Citri said, to think that Naruto would be able to make it rain again. It wasn't hard, Naruto said as they focused on him and looked shocked at him. Your climate was completely out of balance. My trees, while healing the ground, were imbued with the energy of the Citri clan, whom specialize in water magic, slowly released their energy into the air, gathering water-filled clouds that were ready to burst and shower that energy over the lands, bringing life back to the dying earth. According to Sirzex, why you're awake? With a raised eyebrow, Naruto asked, why wouldn't I be? He swallowed a little and said, well, you've been asleep for nearly a week now. We were starting to fear the worst, before turning to face the people dancing in the rain and shouting, he is awake. I was so worried. Then it started to rain. I haven't seen it rain before. I got so excited. You did it, Naru-kun. The trees are strong and the grounds around them are looking healthier than I have ever seen. You have my vote. Serafal exclaimed as she tackled Naruto to the ground as soon as the dancing stopped. You have mine too, said a sluggish voice that Naruto was unfamiliar with. Turning to face him only served to confirm that he had never met him. His black hair was pulled back into a pineapple shape, and his face was heavily shadowed. At 5 o'clock his eyes appeared to be sleepy, and his angular face gave off the impression that he was attempting to extract as many pieces from Naruto in a single glance. We haven't met yet, mostly because it is troublesome, but I am Falbium Asmodeus, the final Mao. I visited Serafal and found the strange Mickey tree, as she calls it, is able to heal wounds, along with the water that passes through its roots. Using it in our tea and for the water of our troops has already started to make them stronger than before. Actually, I lied. you will have my vote if you place one of those Mickey trees near our military base. I can't do that, Falbium, Naruto said with a warm smile, observing the looks he was receiving. He went on. The white tree that we planted together in the sea tree garden is the Mickey tree, right, Sarah-chan? Yes, I named the white tree with the pretty purple leaves Mickey, Seraphal said, nodding into his chest as her eyes widened slightly. Falbium sighed slightly before grinning and responding, such a nice name. Though it is your special tree, Sarah-chan, I will find something for your section through Falbium, but it won't be the Mickey tree, Naruto said. Where is Grayfia? I thought she was watching over you, Sirzex asked, tapping his chin thoughtfully. Naruto looked pale. I was going to get something for her to eat when I woke up, but there was so much noise coming from outside that I had to check out what was happening. How much trouble do you think I am going to be in? Seraphal jumped away from the blonde as a chilling presence appeared in the door frame behind them. Everyone turned to look at the new presence, which turned out to be Grayfia. Her hair was still untidy as she strode forward without even looking at Lord Gremory. Please forgive me for my next actions, she said without waiting for a response, picking up the blonde male from the ground and slamming her lips into his before holding him tightly. It took him a few moments to realize she was crying. I was so worried when I woke up and you were gone. I tried searching for you by your aura, but I don't know what it is like, and, she said. I'm sorry I worried you, but I noticed I had been asleep for a long time and wanted to get us something to eat, but then I noticed everyone was outside and got distracted, Naruto said softly as he rubbed Grayfia's back. Rain. I haven't felt rain in the underworld for so long, Grayfia said, slowly stepping out from Naruto and noticing that the girls were all drenched. She turned to ask Naruto to stand with her, but as she did, he wrapped his arm around her, drawing her closer. It is as if you read my mind at times, Grayfia said. And if I did? Then you would know what I want, she said softly, placing her hands on his chest as she looked up into his eyes and watched him lean down and kiss her. They stood in the rain, sharing a passionate moment that seemed to last much longer for them than it did for onlookers. Grayfia grinned as she leaned into his chest and said, You would be correct, my dear. Feeling her shake her head against his chest, the blonde asked, Oh? No, Naruto-sama, for the moment? With her arms firmly encircling his waist and refusing to let go, she said, I was too focused on you to do my job properly. This is how you have affected me, my dear. I was forced to take time off from work until you were fully recovered, she said. Grayfia, you do know Ab, yes. Gabriel spoke to me once while we shared time at the cabin. She understood that you would need to take multiple mates, so that you could work properly. She also said that she wanted to be the queen no matter what. I assume that happened when you returned to heaven. I do not mind being your second wife, as long as you stop making me worry about your safety constantly. With an uncomfortable laugh, Naruto held her close and said, I don't try to worry you, I am just trying to do what I feel is right. Grayfia muttered, that is what worries me the most. You have no real regard for your own safety. Gabriel must be a saint to put up with this feeling constantly. Before her stomach began to growl and ruin any mood that had been developing. With a sun-like smile, he swept her off her legs and walked through the rain, pausing before Sirzek and the Gremorys. Sounds like we need to get you something to eat, he said. Do you guys think we could get something to eat? Will Grayfia be sitting with us today? Asked Lady Gremory, or Venelana as you might call her, with a kind smile. She sure will, Venelana, and if she doesn't eat then I will just have to feed her again, Naruto said, shifting his arm around to cover the happy-made girl's mouth. Before she could say anything, Grayfia became motionless in his arms and slowly turned to see a mile-wide smile on the brunette devil's face. A furious Gabriel was one of the few things that frightened Naruto. Really, Naruto? Grayfia must have managed to forget that fact when she was telling us how she knew you, Naruto said. It had happened twice in his lengthy acquaintance with her, and he was at fault for the first one. His second phobia is equally logical. It is of the smile he is seeing from Venelana, or as some would call her, the brunette ruin princess. He had no idea what it took to be referred to as a ruin princess, but he was willing to wager that it wasn't given to anyone simply for spoiling someone's day. It is strange that you wouldn't know, dear mother. After all, Grayfia told me all about how much of a charmer Naruto can be, not to mention his body made of stone. Sarah-sama. Venelana nodded her head. Grayfia, I have decided that when Naruto is staying with us, it is not fair on either of you for you to continue working as a maid, so you will be on leave whenever Naruto is staying with us. After all, it is the least that we can do to help support one of the greatest minds that I have met before. Don't worry, you will only have your dignity ripped apart until you are nothing more than a quivering mess, Sirzek said as he and Hugo clapped each other's shoulders. Grayfia managed to free herself from Naruto's hold and swiftly moved to stand with Venelana and Sarah as they began to gossip like the women that they were. Naruto had a bewildered expression on his face. It is true, my son here just recently went through the same ordeal with Sarah, just do be thankful that oh never mind, there goes Miss Seraphol, I wish you the best of luck Naruto. I think I may have made a mistake, he said with a horrified expression. Oh yes, yes you did, the two Grammary respond. Naruto yelled back, haha, come on Sarah-chan, are you even trying to keep up? As he leapt through the air, Seraphol, with a big sulk on her face, was pursuing the blonde around the underworld because she was supposed to be assisting him in coming up with a plan for Falbium for the military, but instead it had devolved into a big game of tag. Her dress had changed to one that was more noble looking, with frills around her wrists. Her legs were covered because it was considered improper for a lady to display her ankles, although it made for very awkward fights. He dragged Seraphol out with him because, although he already knew Grayfia before coming here, she was like a bright light down in this place called the underworld. Grayfia stayed home today, feeling like talking to Sarah and Venelana, and he felt a sense of dread hanging over his form. Although Searsex was entertaining, the blonde didn't like that he seemed a little too serious. Hugo was a pretty cool guy, but he had to manage his household while maintaining discipline among the branch families. But now Naruto was wearing something else, a tan vest with a deep blue collar etched with fine gold and fur around the shoulders. In the human world, it resembled something a prince might wear in the winter. The humans were still very primitive, as they were in any case. He was given an orange scarf-like piece of cloth to wear around his neck to go with his vest, but Seraphol described it as an accessory that she thought he would look good in. Although they were still far behind the angels, the devils were moving much more quickly, which did not surprise Naruto. Ajuka was a brilliant man who was working wonders to elevate them into a new era, and it was evident. Naruto had determined that this nation needed a ruler with a good character and a pure heart, but that was for another time. He had discovered a solution to the problem, a blade that would only allow someone of a high enough caliber to wield her. This was the reason why humans were so far behind, at least in one country, because they had been without a king for so long. As he descended from the sky into a spacious courtyard, he saw what he assumed to be his destination, a large group of men and women practicing magic and brandishing swords. He rubbed his head sheepishly and heard a long, drawn-out yawn that said, "Yo, don't attack this one, he could kill you without thinking about it." The voice of their leader seemed to make the people pointing their weapons at the blonde stiffen. Usually, he just slept through their practice completely, showing no interest in anything. However, here he was, scratching his head as he moved through the crowd and stopped in front of the blonde. They appeared to be about the same height, with Naruto possibly being an inch or so taller. "You seem to be in good spirits today," Falbium said, directing the blonde's attention back to him as he swiftly scanned the crowd with barely perceptible glances. However, he watched as he threw a hand out to the side and caught Seraphol mid-fall. He had no intention of commenting on that. "Moo, you're too fast for me, Naru-kun. Thank you, Sarah-chan. You just gave me the best idea for the military. Falbium, how would you feel about me installing a repeating gravity sequence over a training area that increases the gravity on a person's body by 5 times? The blonde said, raising an eyebrow at her before enlarging his eyes. That sounds kinda like a drag, really. What's gravity do again?" Seraphol whispered, leaning close to Naruto's ear. Naturally, this brought Naruto back to his earlier point. The angels use this training method, and it is what allowed us to stay so far ahead of the devils in the Great War. That plus your military leader that was in charge of the masses wasn't the smartest of people. If you had been led directly by Lucifer back then, we would have had much more trouble. Gravity is what keeps us all on the ground. By making it heavier in a certain area, it would make everything you do more difficult, like walking, running, flying, jumping, playing with swords, or even using your magical sequences. Then when you leave the gravity field, you will be faster and stronger. Falbium narrowed an onyx eye at the blonde. His predecessor for his role as a Mao was fairly fighting smart, but he had to reconsider after witnessing the blonde in action and seeing it pushed off so effortlessly and carelessly. He saw the blonde take up arms against the dragons that invaded their field of battle, and he saw that the barrier was not scratched at all that day. The moment his barrier dropped and he summoned that great shining blade of his, the angel's disposition changed to that of battle-hardened warriors, demonstrating to him that they had not taken the fight seriously at all. However, that wasn't even the worst. He could still recall those blue wings, which were made of pure energy and were enormous and unlike anything the devils had ever seen. He could recall looking at Lucifer and seeing him smile and whisper, "Good, it has been too long, my friend." That was the day he first experienced fear. The dragons that tore through the field, destroying everything in their path, were stopped by the blonde before he crushed them, making his battle appear almost effortless. He could recall the blonde's ever-imposing form before he disappeared, but the fact that God had died during the fighting shocked him. Even though the Mao at the time were severely wounded from stray shots of the fighting and the devils had to flee, Falbium realized that God was concealed from the Bible and that the blonde in front of him was what gave the impression that he was unbeatable during the entire battle. According to what he knew, his name was not even mentioned in passing. The dying Lucifer then said, "Do you really think you stand a chance without me?" As Sears pressed his hand through the man's chest, heaven's trump card has been revealed to you. How do you hope to defeat something you don't understand? Indeed, they were unaware of his abilities and were unable to gauge his strength, but based on his observations, he had resolved the climate problems in the underworld and provided them with a method to produce devils more quickly in less than 2 weeks. They were now in his debt because he was the most dangerous type of opponent, one who could alter the course of a fight with a single breath. For some reason, he wanted a ceasefire between heaven and the devils, but he couldn't figure out why crushing the devils would be simple. But he wasn't interested in the devils, at least not in that idea. Falbium asked, "You are uplifting us to fight in some war, aren't you?" Which made Serafal gasp and made Naruto frown but not reject him. "I can't deny that your help might be needed in a coming fight, but I could have easily gone to one of the pantheons for their aid. Believe me, it would have been easier." After setting Serafal down, Naruto folded his arms across his chest and said, "I wanted to try to patch up some of the issues between devils and heaven while preparing you all for war. How long do we have? I don't know. What kind of enemies are we going to be fighting? Monsters, creatures that I can't even name. They're vile and I see them rampaging through both the human world and the underworld before finally coming to heaven. It is troublesome to be dragged into something like this, mostly because you plan on using the underworld as a buffer. After all, that gate is still here, isn't it?" Falbium sighed wearily and rubbed his temples. He didn't need to look at the blonde to get his response because he already knew it. It is the reason that they have to go through here before they can even look at going to heaven. After all, he scowled when Naruto didn't answer. "You aren't going to try to defend yourself?" he asked. "No, because it is the truth. I do plan to have the underworld act as a buffer to what is coming. I know this, you know this, and I suspect that every other Mao has come to this conclusion as well," Naruto said softly. "It is the sad truth, but what is worse is that this would happen no matter what. Even if the underworld turned their back on heaven, the enemy would still march through and take what they wanted. If they did somehow manage to make it to heaven without destroying the underworld, then your world would end anyway." Falbium scowled. Ajuka had previously brought up this theory, but if the blonde was right, then it might be true. He slowly raised his hand to attract the soldiers' attention and said, "You can all go home for the day. This conversation is troublesome enough without having to explain it again once he leaves." There was some complaining, but they all went when the three of them were by themselves. Serafal stood by Falbium's side, looking hurt. "Please explain yourself, Naruto-san," she said softly, as if it were hard to find the right words. "As you know, the world was meant to end when God died," Serafal gasped. Falbium responded with a slight nod to indicate that he understood. "A world without God isn't possible, and I have no doubt that Lucifer knew this, and had a plan to hold God captive should he win. But I saw that there was a chance that one day, God might die. I installed a fail-safe in heaven. It is called the system. More specifically, it is doing God's job. It maintains life and tries its best to keep balance in the world. Though it is not almighty, it is able to make mistakes, and at times they need to be fixed by those of us in heaven. If this system were to fall, well, the skies would turn to fire." "Nope," Naruto said, large chains extending from his back that looked like discs that were linked by chains. "Okay. Now try to keep up here because this is where most people get lost. As you know, the underworld is not directly connected to the human world, or Earth. Yes, let's use that name. This means that you cannot simply move from one to the other via flight or walking. No, you have to take a portal. Now the worlds are connected via a series of portals that weave in between one another, making up the complex structure that exists in this universe. It is only through these portals that people can travel between worlds like the underworld, heaven and earth. Just for the example, because there are hundreds of them relating to all the other religions. Are you still with me?" Falbium gave a slight nod, and Serafal had swirled the corners of her eyes while referring to earthly chains. "Close enough. Now when a new religion comes into play, the head gods have to gather to reform the chain network and keep the portals operating like normal. These are what make up the dimensional gap, and the reason for why it can seem so large. When you enter, you can faintly see another world on the other side. If you enter it from the underworld, it will be Earth that you see. You can try all that you might to reach Earth through the gap, but you will die long before you can make the journey. This is the light that people see when they die. It is their body floating in the dimensional gap before one of the religions finds it and places it where it belongs." "And what does this have to do with heaven and the underworld?" Falbium asked, nodding once more before raising his hand. "Getting to that," Naruto said quickly, a bit annoyed that he was interrupted. "As you understand, there are multiple levels of both heaven and the underworld. Now all of the levels of the underworld are in a linear path on the chain network, and in the deepest level of the underworld, there is Tartarus. Now you know what is in there, right? Falbium grunted briefly before nodding. Okay. Well, the creatures in Tartarus are being bound by the chain network. They have to stay there. Their bodies are what are keeping the chain network stable. If they were to die, or to be released from their chains, then the entire network would start to crumble. There would be no levels, and the underworld would slowly draw to the center of the network, being crushed together with every other world on its way. And what is in the center of this network? A few times Naruto tapped his chin. It is a place beyond the comprehension of devils and angels. At your current level anyway, it would buy up to a coin toss as to see what happened first, your bones being destroyed and ripped out of your skin, or your brain turning to mush and leaking out from your ears. And before you ask, yes, I have been there. It was in fact where I was born, and it is one of the reasons why I am one of the people that looks after the chain network. So now do you understand why I think all this fighting is stupid? Falbium's eyes widened slightly, but he did not look at Seraphal, who was now sleeping on the ground. Okay, I can somewhat understand what is happening. Basically, Lucifer was charged with keeping the chain tight, right? She said, trying to maintain her focus. With his hands in his pockets, Naruto said, basically. And you are some kind of super being. Right now I'm not. See, I kind of made a mistake a long time ago and split myself in half. Well, it was about the time that I made Eden S. With a wave of his hand, Falbium said, wait, you made Eden? Well, yeah. Did you really think that anyone could make a tree that gives off such a large amount of natural energy? The blonde asked, cocking his head to the side in bewilderment. Kinda just thought it was an angel thing, honestly, replied the military man. Anyway, so you are at like half of your strength at the moment. Where is the other half? In Lilith, I think. You are scattered across a town the size of Japan? Falbium said, squinting his eyes. Oh heavens no. I meant Lilith as in Lucifer's wife. She is still alive, you know? He saw her die and crumble into nothing, so he shook his head and clenched his fists. That is impossible. She was killed before the Great War, he said. She did this when she died, didn't she? Naruto asked with a melancholy smile. Judging by your face, I am going to guess yes, that is the power to pass through the dimension gap without using the standard portals, which can only be obtained through strenuous training and being born into the right family from the center world. We can create chains and use them as we wish. The man was filled with dread when he saw what happened next, even though Lilith's hand had been an abyss black. Falbium expressed his shock at the result, saying, this is a lot to take in. So that barrier was, at most, half of his true strength. Tell me about it. Ajuka emerged from a formula of magic, couldn't sleep for a few days when he told me in Searsex, though he also forgot to mention that fact that he isn't the strongest thing from the center world. There is a king there that rules with an iron fist. Naruto just escaped from it with God, basically using the fact that they were going to maintain the chain network as an excuse. It isn't an excuse, I am still maintaining it, sighed Naruto. Though Ajuka is right, and if the king senses that there is a chance that this section of the chain network will cause damage to the center world, then he will just cut the link, letting us fall down further and further away until there is no way for you all to receive support. And your powers will run out, meaning you will become human, and you will turn to your human age. So I ask you, will you leave whatever is coming in the hands of the angels, or will you fight for your future, Falbium? The spiky-haired man let out a faint. This is way above what I thought was going to come from this, though I guess if you get this gravity thingo going, then I can give you my vote on the ceasefire. Though as far as becoming your allies and getting dragged into this war, I'm not going to throw away the lives of devils. If I don't think that they are ready, I won't let them go. Naruto nodded. I respect that, and I can have a recurring gravity sequence up in a few days. Falbium said, well, I think I am going to go sleep off this coming migraine. Just make sure you take Seraphal home. Oh, and to explain it to her, just say you come from a different dimension that is connected to this one. All the chain network and stuff will just fry her head, before closing his eyes. Does Grayfia know about this? He asked, but received no answer. What about Gabriel? He asked again. Michael? Michael and Lucifer both knew. Well, they knew that I was in a higher position than God and that we didn't come from this world. Naruto was correct. Creating a recurring gravity sequence for the military training grounds was so simple that he even allowed them to adjust the gravity. His justification was sound. If you can maintain a straight face to your wives, while concealing something that's significant, how am I to know what you are telling me is the truth? Falbium had been observing him intently the entire time. To be honest, Naruto couldn't blame him for thinking that way. This was also the reason he was by himself in his room tonight, standing out on the balcony, and currently had 3 of 4 votes from the Mao. Seraphal was upset, but after he explained what was going on, she realized that he was only doing this to protect them, and she stated that he still had her vote, but she wanted to get to know him better. He couldn't understand why, though. Even though Sears was arguably one of the devils he spent the most time with, he was still unaware of his true nature. He was the Mao's leader, but nothing other than his strength and compassion seemed to keep him there. When his room's door opened, he looked over his shoulder to see Grayfia standing there with her arms folded under her bust, still wearing a frustrated expression. As she entered, she looked around for a few seconds before realizing he was outside. She approached him softly and stood behind him, wearing a nightgown that was just thin enough for him to see the outline of her body underneath it. She had made it a point to wear her hair down as part of her uniform, and she didn't wear makeup, so he could see how beautiful she was. "So what are you?" she asked. "My name in full is Prince Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze Sutsuki, heir to the crystalline throne at the Center World. Though here, I am just Naruto Uzumaki. My titles mean incredibly little as I am basically in self-imposed exile while my uncle sits on the throne. I am a being that is neither good nor evil. I merely exist to keep the balance. At least that is how I used to think. God, well, he is dead now, so the old perv, Jiraiya was his name, was basically my caretaker, giving me a place to practice and grow strong for me to eventually take back the throne. But first we need to fix this world," explained, turning around to face her side. "I am sorry for not being so open about this. I am not upset with the fact that you were hiding this from me," Grayfia said with a sigh. "I am upset that you told someone else before me. The only one I would accept, barely, is Gabriel, as she is your first wife. Actually, are you even fox folk?" "Yes," Naruto replied with a firm nod. "Like I said, asking the Pantheons for help would be easy, because they came with me. That is if they remember. Anyhow, Aphrodite is my grandmother, who slept with a god like fox. I think his name was Kurama, to make my mother Kushina, who was a chaos fox, whom then married my father Minato Namikaze Sutsuki, true high king of the crystalline throne. Before him it was held by my grandmother Kagaya, or the dimension-jumping rabbit goddess." Although Grayfia was unfamiliar with all of those names, she had only heard of Aphrodite before. She was grateful for his succinct explanation of them, saying, "That sounds like quite the lineage. On my dad's side at least, most people see Aphrodite as a concubine, and her offspring as mistakes. Though this was the reason for my parents' meeting, my father took her in off the streets and turned her into a queen that the kingdom was proud to have for the most part. Uncle was not thrilled with my mother becoming queen." Naruto nearly spat out the last sentence. Having split from her own brother when she abandoned the old Mao faction, Grayfia recognized that there was obviously animosity in Naruto's family. She chuckled somewhat, wondering if Naruto understood that he had followed in his father's footsteps with her. She wasn't a queen, but at least that piece was still waiting for her, and she wanted Naruto to be there when it was implanted in her. He had essentially spared her from a life of servitude and placed her with a group of people who treated her equally, other than the time she demanded to be their maid. "If it makes you feel any better, I haven't told Gabriel yet, so you know before her. I will be frank, it does not make me feel better knowing that my husband has basically killed himself, but at least I am not the last to know," she said with a cheeky grin and grasped his hand. "Because of the time I took looking after you and holding you while you slept, I have grown used to the action. Now I find it hard to sleep by myself. You will have to become my pillow from now on, my dear, or would prefer that I call you my lordship." Naruto put his arms around Grayfia's shoulders and felt her slender body against his. "I haven't gone by that in so long," he said. "I would prefer it if you didn't." "As you wish, my dear, though, I do wonder, how old are you?" Grayfia asked, nodding as she laid her head on his chest. Dear? I forgot." Some god forgot his age, so Grayfia bit her lip to contain her laughter. "Do you have an estimation?" she asked. "I think I am around twice the age as Earth. I think. Wait, what year is it on Earth?" 573 AD, my dear, was her prompt response. "Then I should be around I still don't know, I have lost count, but I think I am near 40 or 50,000 years old," Naruto said, nodding as if he were solving a lengthy equation in his mind. Grayfia then went into his arms, faint and wide-eyed, saying, Grayfia? Really, I am still quite young, Grayfia. Oh, you must be tired, let's go to bed then?" Naruto sighed slightly as he moved the two of them to the big bed at the side of his room. Ever since Grayfia entered his life, the world has become more fascinating. It seems as though she was the catalyst for a lot of things that transpired after she arrived. When Naruto removed some invisible dust from his hands, Sears, who were observing the blonde's actions and witnessing man after man attempt to extract a blade from the stone it was wedged in, gave him a perplexed look. "A sword in a stone?" they asked. "They need a leader. That sword will only respond to the person who can lead England to prosper, a person of high caliber, with good intentions and the strength to never give up, no matter how difficult the road before them seems," Naruto replied with accuracy. However, Sears simply raised an eyebrow before slapping his hands together and making a O shape with his mouth. I I guess if it is a prince doing this it is okay, right? He asked. You really don't plan on letting that go, do you? The red-haired man grinned and said, not in my lifetime. I heard Grayfia faint when she realized how old you were. Naruto sighed and put a hand on Sirzek's shoulder before teleporting the two of them to the underworld. Well, at least she didn't beat me like Gabriel did. For someone who was meant to be the perfect woman, she sure has a temper. He said he had been honest about everything for almost a week, and it had only been 4 days since he had to tell Gabriel who he was. He was still bruised from the encounter. Do you regret taking her? Sirzek asked, interrupted by a childish scream as the woman in question appeared running down the hall with a towel wrapped around her bust, her still wet hair clinging to her body. As she held the towel tight, her eyes widened in shock as she slid into Naruto, knocking him off his feet and sending him into a nearby wall. It felt like they had entered a war zone when they returned to the Gramarye estate, even though this had been the previous few days. It didn't take long for Sirzek to join him, as it seemed that Sarah was the reason behind Gabriel's scream moments earlier. The two sat side by side, attempting to stop the girls from attacking each other for odd reasons, saying, not for a moment, Sirzek. There she is. When the two men looked up, they saw Sarah fall running down the hall before she slipped on the water that had managed to collect and slid to a stop with her face firmly planted in the ground and her behind sticking up in the air. Moo! She slowly turned her face upwards to see a bewildered Sirzek and Naruto, their thin clothing sticking to their figures and turning see-through because of the extremely wet girls lying on top of them. Wah! Said Seraphal, her ever-present elegance, firmly, before pouting. Oh, you have returned, Naruto-sama, Sirzek-sama. I hope that your trip was fruitful, Grayfia said calmly as she made her way down the hallway, noticing the large body of water and avoiding it before stopping. As you can see, it has been quite eventful here. According to Grayfia, as for how this has come to be, it would seem that Gabriel-sama was able to find itching powder and thought that it would be a good idea to place it into the underwear of everyone in the house. The two men nodded. Hold on, then why aren't you being affected by it, Grayfia? Sirzek said with a feeble laugh, and Naruto nodded in agreement when he thought no one was listening. He even gave Gabriel a quick high five. Well, you see, I am, the maid said, stiffening as her cheeks took on the same hue as Sirzek's hair. Grayfia forgot to put on underwear again, Seraphal casually replied. Yes, that was the flaw in my plan. I forgot to account for Grayfia's forgetfulness when it comes to underwear, and I am still not happy with you, Naru-kun, she said, pushing the blonde away and getting to her feet. She gave a little huff as she stormed off, landing in the same position as the Seraphal in front of her. Just so you know, this position looks better on me, Leviathan, she said. What was that? I couldn't hear you because of my large breasts blocking out your high-pitched voice. My voice is not high-pitched, is not. They both looked in the direction of Naruto, but he was gone, along with Sirzek, and Sarah. Grayfia, who was standing there looking bored, responded to their question by saying, he left the moment you both started to argue. In the meantime, with Naruto and Sirzek, so you seem to have done well for the underworld. It is hard to believe that we were fighting a war up until recently. You have my thanks, Sarah said as she went to change. The two were standing beneath one of the trees that Naruto had recently planted, which was about to bloom. I still can't think of a way to help you though, so I hope this will be enough. A tiny fragment of my soul rests in this necklace. It will empower the wearer, but it will also act as a beacon. If it is ever destroyed, I will appear to fight by your side, Naruto said, raising an eyebrow at the man before reaching out and holding an odd necklace with golden chains tightly wrapped around a light blue crystal. I don't know if I can take this. I was planning to give you my vote once you got the others. I just hadn't expected you to do it so quickly was all. Sirzek took the chain lightly and felt the power emanating from it. It wasn't greater than his own, but it wasn't something to laugh at. To think this was a tiny part of the blonde's soul. Then think of it as thanks for looking after Grayfia for me, and for also putting a roof over my head while I was here. Naruto breathed a sigh of relief and placed into his pockets. You're important, Sirzek, and while Lucifer in his prime was stronger than you are now, you are still a pup with lots of room for improvement. We both know that. After nodding and putting it in his pocket, Sirzek said, no, I have found what you can do to get my vote, though it is selfish, he trailed, but Naruto raised an eyebrow as if he wanted him to go on. I need help getting used to fighting at my full power. In other words, I need a coach and training partner. The last person I trained with was Jiraiya. So this should be interesting, Naruto said with a broad smile. He then turned to face Sirzek in a combat stance, with his legs shoulder-width long and wide, his front foot planted while his back rested on the ball, a bend in his knee to keep him level, one palm facing upwards and the other facing the ground, and he said, come Sirzek. Naruto, aren't you going to power up or something? Sirzek said, grinning awkwardly, After they had moved to some sort of arena and he had changed into a breastplate and tan pants, his crimson hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail. I am using the traditional style of combat. I use the energy in the air to fight, and not my own. This style allows for me to fight without tiring myself. You could say that without getting my other half back from Lilith, that this is my max. I am a little rough around the edges, but I should be enough to let you refine your skills. Sears X nodded and released his destructive power, which covered his body like a second skin. I can tell that this will be different from anything before, he said, flashing forward with his fist raised before Naruto could say anything more. Naruto smiled as the movement seemed slow, almost like it was moving through water, but it had to be much, much faster at the speed he was traveling. It was a slow, almost deliberate push. That was close. It took me a little longer than normal to enter this state, and even still I am having to concentrate to keep it. We can start now, Sears X said, his eyes widening before he was flung across the arena with a shocked expression on his red-black skin, his eyes and mouth both bright white. He looked up at Naruto, who had light blue eyes and wisps of light coming from the corners. Before a huge tree with chains flying from its branches exploded out, Naruto leapt forward and thrust his hands out, tearing up the ground. Naruto watches in mild surprise as Sears X roars out of his throat, sending wave after wave of destruction at the growing chains and branches. He towers over him, rushes around, and wraps tightly around him. The branches and chains begin to erode and crumble before rusting and rejoining the ground. Ah, not bad. I guess using natural means to combat you won't be effective, Naruto said, shifting his hands once more to a narrow stance and forming a blade-like shape with his right hand. Sears X was forced to watch, his body immobile as his eyes were fixed on the hand, watching as it slowly rose into the air before descending with a thunderous roar. Psionic waves. This is my final form of combat, though it is quite weak at the moment. It should still be enough to get some training for you. Let me just dull the blade a little, Naruto said, taking a shallow breath before turning slightly and repeating the same action with his hand, only this time it made a large indent. Okay, let's begin. The earth in front of them was split, seemingly cut and pulled apart, with not a single drop of soil moving. Wait, that cutting motion with your arm, what does it do? Smiled with a fine brow. It vibrates so quickly that it forces atoms to separate like they were never joined. In short, it is like being cut apart so fast that you don't even notice. Only this time, your body notices and thinks that it is normal for you to be missing a limb. Thus it just stops trying to heal it. The wound is sealed automatically and cannot be healed with normal means. Under the influence of his destructive power, Sears X said, that is terrifying. Most people from the center world have an ability that is beyond the comprehension of normal minds. This is just the most simple of this form of combat. It will allow you to dodge as you know where it is coming from. But the only question I have, Sears X, is, can you look away? Naruto moved his hand once more when Sears X attempted to move. His eyes locked onto it and he was unable to pull away or move his body to dodge. The result was a light bop on the head from Naruto's attack. You feel the need to watch, don't you? Naruto sighed. As he moved forward, Naruto lightly tapped his forehead. True fear, something you cannot train away by normal means. The simplest way is to stare into the abyss, letting it gaze back into you and relishing in the feeling. You will understand much, much more than you do right now. Your body will learn to use its deepest and most hidden power. Naruto smiled warmly as he stepped back and said, Sears X, will you gaze into the abyss with me? Grayfia and the others entered, and Sarah paused in disbelief at what she saw. Naruto and Sears X were gone, but she could feel the right in front of her, inside some enormous black cube that didn't seem to belong. Then, it began to crack, shattering outwards as shards flew out and turned into black smoke before dissipating. There was a pale Sears X standing there, almost as if he had fallen ill, and Naruto was holding him up gently. But that wasn't what startled them. Rather, Sears X felt different, his body motionless, his eyes black. As they slowly laid him on the ground, they saw Naruto raise 2 fingers into the air and slowly bring them down to Sears X's forehead, causing the black to fade from his eyes and his skin to gradually return to normal. His chest rose as he inhaled deeply, coughed a few times, and looked around wildly before clinging to Naruto as if he were a lifeline and exclaiming, I saw it, I felt it. Naruto asked in a quiet voice, and are you scared, Sears X? No, I actually feel fine, like I understand now. Is this how you feel all the time? He said after widening his eyes and exhaling a few times. His heartbeat was unexpectedly calm. Naruto sighed lightly. You did good, Sears X. You might need some time to get used to things again, but you have a really strong head on your shoulders. As for me, I don't know, I don't remember what it was like before I viewed the abyss. That Sears X was true darkness. Do you now see the difference? With a sigh and a nervous laugh, Sears X lay down and said, I feel a little different. I know this will probably seem a little strange, but did you see something? He also put his hand to his head. Naruto slightly cocked his head, When you gaze into the abyss, do not expect it to not do the same. You may think that the pantheons, the Shinto, the biblical god and myself are all gods. It is true in a sense, but there is something in the abyss. I spoke to my grandmother, from my father's side, about it a few times. You saw the little girl, didn't you, Sirzex? Her skin pale, almost white with deep black eyes and unkempt long hair. How did you know? Sirzex asked, his eyes widening. She nearly caught you, didn't she, Sirzex? The redhead froze. I figured as much. The closer she gets to you, the more you take on her features. After a while you can't return and become what we call hollow, Naruto softly added. Trust me, Sirzex. Y'all really don't want to know, as he noticed the man was about to say something. Why did you show me this? Naruto asked, taking a step back and grinning awkwardly as the girls remained motionless. Naruto took another step back before beginning to hover in midair. To be honest, Sirzex, you reminded me of a friend I used to have. I just wanted to see something was all, he said. Sirzek's question caused Naruto to tilt his head to the side in perplexity. Well, did you find what you were looking for? He asked. No, you expect me to know the answer. I guess I am not sure right now, but I know what you are looking for now. I can open the gate to Tartarus for you. Thank you, Sirzex, Gabriel and Grayfia said as they appeared next to him, while Serafal and Sarah did the same. The two groups of girls exchanged glances, and the men were perplexed by what was going on. Sirzex gently raised his eyebrows. This will take some getting used to. The complexity of the different dimensions is much greater than I thought. I feel like a Juka and that scares me. Don't be. We will continue your training when I return, Sirzex, but only temporarily, as I still need to tell Heaven and the fallen angels that we are now in a ceasefire, said Naruto, leaning back and laughing lightly. The fallen have agreed. No, not yet. Naruto left for Tartarus the day after that conversation, which took place almost 2 weeks ago. Hello, Sir Kun, did you miss me? A voice he didn't think he would ever hear again chimed through the room as Sirzex was staring down at the paper in his hands. He turned his head just enough to the right to see the speaker's crimson eyes and her long, wavy raven hair, which stopped just past her enormous breasts. She wore a deep red dress that accentuated her figure and hugged her form. Her skin appeared to be silky to the touch and was a creamy white color. Lilith, I hadn't expected to see you again. Her eyes were shadowed, and her lips were black. When Sirzex said, when the god of gods comes into Tartarus and destroys your demon army before telling you that you will join him once more, I tend to listen, especially since he is a relative in a strange way. She looked thoughtful. You do understand what he meant by Joan, right? Lilith shrugged and walked around to sit on the front of his desk, her back to him, then bent her neck backwards at an almost impossible angle to look at him. Yes, he has already taken his soul fragment back. Oh, I must say, it was quite thrilling to feel such raw power. My skin tingled just from being in the same area as him, and I couldn't handle the majority of the powers and techniques in that fragment, so I sealed them away so that I didn't accidentally use them, Lilith said. With an exhausted exhale, Sirzex asked, so what are you planning to do now? Not sure. I was going to take over the underworld with my demon army, but they're gone now, plus I was asked not to, so I guess I could help. Blah, that tasted awful to say. Anyway, that word you with running the underworld, she responded with a slight scowl on her face. I hate that word. Wait, demons? I thought that we were demons? Sirzex said, sounding more than perplexed. No, you are a devil, like Lucifer. You still have light, even if it is tainted, Lilith said, giving him a questioning glance before letting out a wonderful, almost entrancing laugh. On the other hand, I am a demon, a creature born of darkness, not tainted light, while you are creatures that have grown stronger from desires. I am desire. I formed an army of creatures like me, but it was not enough to fight against him. I guess we could call him brother, though in his homeland he was known as the Prince of Chaos. That is a rather ominous title to give someone, Sirzex whispered. From what I could gather from his soul fragment, he once tricked the pantheons into a war with one another because he grew tired of waiting for dinner and found a way to entertain himself, Lilith said, shrugging her shoulders once more, causing her ample bust to bounce with the action, almost bursting free from her tight dress. Seeing the expression on Sirzek's face, Lilith burst out laughing again, saying, do not worry, he has changed a lot since then, but I figure it was because of those kinds of acts when he was younger that he gained his name. Sirzex asked, not quite sure if he wanted the answer, so how much do you know about him, Lilith? I was there during the time when he came to Earth and alongside God created the life that is on it in Eden, and when the pantheons came with him to help govern it. Though we split apart probably close to 10 or maybe 20,000 years ago. During the Great War we were lucky. If he had have given into his feelings at that time, well, I think that the three factions would cease to exist, Lilith replied calmly. Jiraiya was like his father. We never really knew Minato, We spent most of our time with Kashina well, our mother kind of wow, this is difficult. I want to say that I am like his twin. I have a large amount of his memories, but he was the one that created me, so it is just it feels wrong. Lilith let out a sigh and her form seemed to sag slightly. With his hands clasped together, Sirzex smiled sadly at the woman and said, please take your time. Or I could tell you to go fuck yourself and just leave. She focused on the newly created Lucifer. Don't push me boy, I am he LPing you purely because my prince asked me to. I who was born from darkness, can lead you, who has just viewed it to understand better. Is it really that difficult for you to say help? Lilith laughed softly. That is rich coming from the man that killed my husband, or did you forget about that little fact, Sir Kun? So, he was a bad man, but you didn't have the right to kill him, that was mine alone. He never loved me, he loved the power that I held, and when he noticed that he couldn't control me, he locked me away and removed my child from me, turning her into his personal devil-making machine. Devils, the product of incest, though surely you have already come to this conclusion, that your powers are all just mutations formed by interbreeding. Deformities, blemishes. The closest household to me is the Baal. The power of destruction, really, is that what you call it? The power of destruction, please, that is nothing, it is strong, Sir Kun, don't get me wrong, your little power of destruction will make you quite imposing against most, but it is a single strange of my strength, Lilith said, leaning forward and clutching her stomach as she laughed. You understand what this is, don't you? Lilith said, turning away from his desk and lifting up her right hand. For a moment nothing happened, but then an extremely ominous feeling rolled off it. Psionic waves. It is psionic power, most commonly used as waves by Naruto and some of the other gods. In this state it is strong because of the feeling it gives off. You can now understand what it is, so you aren't frozen. But now that Naruto has his soul back from me, his has become visual. What do you believe is scarier, Sirzex, a power you can't see, or being able to see the terrifying reality of just what psionic power looks like? She left her query unanswered for a moment before walking away when he was unable to respond. Oh, I will be staying in Naruto's room, by the way. Also, he has been gone a long time. Don't you think it is surprising that no one has shown up to check to see if he is okay? Recalling his brief altercation with Naruto, Sirzex asked, should we be worried about any visitors? He had no idea how many people lived in this center world, or whether Naruto was strong enough for those present. Lilith, who was walking toward the door, stopped and smiled, covering her face. Oh, there are a few, though if I had to give a guess as to whom you should be worried about, I would have to say the woman he was once in an arranged marriage with. He beat her out of it by playing some tactical game from the center world. Her feelings for him were, well, let us just say that she was quite smitten. If there was anyone that would come for him, I believe it would be her, and she won't leave until she gets what she wants, or he kills her. To put it mildly, that was problematic. With an inward sigh, he asked the next question, if you two were to fight, who would win? And was afraid of the response. She is stronger than the gods you know of, Sir Kun. Lilith frowned. To be honest, Sir Kun, I'm not that much stronger than you, but I just have much better techniques and control over them. However, from when I last saw her fight, and the strength I had with the soul fragment, and in my prime I wouldn't last more than a minute. While I was born from darkness, she bathed in it, letting it change her. She is stronger than the gods you know of, Sir Kun, Lilith said. And Naruto? A smirk appeared on Lilith's lips as she said, if he got serious, there would be no contest? You mean he has been holding back? Lilith walked over to him and said, Sir Kun, do you really believe that you can defeat me as you are now? Seeing his gaze drop a bit, she laughed. He defeated not only me, but my army, while I still held half of his soul, meaning half of his power. The next time you find an ant, Sir Kun, place it on your thumb and press down with your index finger with only enough strength to cripple it, yet still leave it alive. Maybe you will get some respect then. Such a gap is something I can't picture, Sirzex moaned slightly. No one ever said that devils, angels and the fallen had stopped evolving, Sir Kun. Did you find what you were looking for, Gabriel? He sighed as he sank into his chair after his head snapped up to look at her. He didn't even need to look to his left to see the air transform into the seraph. I knew that Lilith knew I was there. I didn't think that you felt me enter though, Sirzex, but to answer your question, I think I need to punish my husband some more. He really does enjoy keeping his secrets. Her face wrinkled as her gaze took a sorrowful expression. I didn't think that Lilith would be allowed to live, though I guess he trusts her more than me anyway. Sirzex was in an awkward situation because, first of all, there was another woman in his office. He knew that Sarah would probably be upset that Lilith was back, and he also knew that they had been alone together for a short while before Gabriel arrived. Yes, it was another woman Sarah barely knew, but he was still alone with two women, one of whom appeared unsure of herself, and he was at a loss for what to do because they had been enemies less than a year prior. I haven't known Naruto as long as you have, but everything he does seems to have a reason, Gabriel, and from what Michael has told me, your protection was one of his biggest concerns. Circex noticed that her eyes were widening slightly and that his words were correct. I don't know how much help I might be, but I don't want to be defenseless when or if this person comes. I plan on getting stronger. Maybe you should join me. Gabriel's eyes widened slightly as she gazed at him, and then a gentle smile appeared on her face. Because of the large blue giant sun that the planet was orbiting, the sky was a vivid blue color. The once beautiful planet was covered in cities, some of which were floating so high in the sky that they were practically in orbit themselves. The cities were made of a brilliant, reflective golden color. The path was cleared by men as confident footsteps echoed between them, drool and hissing hitting the ground right behind the walker. The creatures appeared to be tall, slithering snake-like creatures with scythes for hands, horrible figures that would frighten regular men. Poverty did not exist in this city, or palace, if you will. Below it, the streets told a different tale. The creature's leader strode forward as if this were normal, which to her, even though time had passed, was not an abnormal experience. Almost like riding a bike, the large doors appeared to glow before splitting and turning into a walkway towards a central chamber that was currently filled with nothing but darkness. She stopped when she got to the end of the walkway, and the creatures followed. The room quickly started to spin before the darkness cleared and revealed a brighter room that appeared to be someone important's office. Illuminated by a brilliant blue light, a white-haired male with baby blue eyes was seen turning around. He gazed at the hazel eyes that were observing him, much like a hawk would at a field mouse. The woman with the creatures behind her hissed, "I have returned." Virgil, with a very slight distortion in her voice. Her skin was darker than white but not tanned, and it might even have a faint green undertone. Her long brown tendrils, which resembled skin-covered dreadlocks, were pushed back behind her head and fell past her shoulders. Her body was securely wrapped in a suit that resembled the one Naruto occasionally dons. With his elbows resting on the golden desk in front of him and his fingers lightly folded, the polished-looking man said calmly, "I take it that you were successful?"
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.